Imagine getting sucked into a hardcore survival game where losing means you die in the real world. To make matters worse, you are immediately exiled to a ruined wasteland with no citizens, no food, and nothing but bloodthirsty monsters. You have completely lost your character's legendary sword skills, leaving you with a single basic ability to pacify wild beasts. But what if your real-world background allows you to turn these monsters into a loyal workforce and build modern artillery to blast your way to survival? This is how our main character's chaotic journey to conquer the Borderlands begins. We start our story with a majestic castle standing tall on a high cliff, surrounded by a bright blue sky. It looks peaceful, but things are about to get chaotic. Inside the grand throne room, a knight named Joran Tamer is kneeling before a blonde-haired queen. She appoints him as the Baron of the Borderlands, leaving Joran extremely confused. The entire court starts whispering among themselves, wondering what a Baron of the Borderlands even is. It sounds like they are sending him straight to the middle of nowhere. Before the gossip can get out of hand, the queen barks out a command for everyone to shut their mouths. Her loud voice echoes throughout the entire room, instantly silencing the crowd. She turns her angry gaze back down to the kneeling knight, asking him if he is deaf. Joran looks up, completely frozen under her intense pressure. Sweat starts dripping down his face as he nervously stammers out a polite denial. He is totally in survival mode right now. The queen smiles down at him sweetly, but her eyes are dead silent. She demands to know why he will not just accept her royal command. To make things weirder, Joran suddenly notices a bizarre status window appearing right in front of his eyes. He is completely lost as to what is happening. Panicking, Joran begs her to withdraw the command, but the queen rejects him with a flat and cold denial. Talk about a brutal shutdown. He practically starts begging for his life, pleading with her to take the command back. He clearly wants absolutely nothing to do with this new job. He tries to play it off smoothly by saying he is just too overwhelmed by her grace, but then he makes the fatal mistake of asking what exactly the Borderlands are. Bad move. The queen twitches with absolute rage as she asks Joran what he just called her. Joran tries to correct himself, but the queen completely snaps, screaming at him to address her as the King of Can. She is absolutely terrifying when she is mad. Joran slams his head all the way to the floor, apologizing profusely and claiming he temporarily lost his mind for her boundless grace. A mysterious mage in a green hood steps forward, casting a spell to show Joran exactly where his new territory is on a massive magical map. The nobles in the back start gossiping again, pointing out that this apocalypse city is a complete wasteland with no citizens, no markets, and nothing but monsters. Suddenly, a hand slams a sword down onto the floor, sending a loud ring through the room as someone commands everyone to shut up. The queen declares that from this day forward, Apocalypse City is officially renamed to Tamer Territory. Talk about a one-way ticket to a monster-infested wasteland. We see a map of the desolate Borderlands as the queen makes her declaration. But then, the Vice Minister of Internal Affairs steps up to speak. He asks the queen what exactly a Baron of the Borderlands is, admitting he has never heard of such a title in the kingdom's history. With a cheerful smile, the queen admits that of course he hasn't heard of it because she literally just made it up on the spot. The minister is absolutely speechless. The queen sarcastically congratulates Joran, telling him he is now the one and only Baron of the Borderlands in history. Joran feels his soul basically leaving his body. She flashes another bright, beautiful smile, telling Joran to protect her precious citizens well. Man, her sweet attitude is low-key terrifying. Poor Joran is left kneeling on the floor in absolute despair. This guy knows he is completely doomed. With the ceremony finished, the queen sheathes her sword, leaving Joran to process his unfortunate new reality. Joran stands up, his face contorting into a mix of anger and pure disbelief. He cannot believe this is actually happening. Internally, he is screaming in absolute rage, cursing his terrible luck. He definitely didn't sign up for this. We see Joran walking out of the castle with a squad of soldiers. He recalls that according to the game's lore, Joran was supposed to become a trusted captain of the Royal Guard. Instead, Joran was a tragic character who got caught up in some major plot incident and ended up dying early. Meanwhile, the soldiers behind him whisper about how weirdly their commander is acting. They wonder if something went wrong during his revival ritual. Joran continues to lose his mind internally, screaming about why he had to be reincarnated as Joran instead of keeping his normal three-syllable name. Looking up at the starry sky, he deeply regrets ever accepting that weird quest back when he was still in the real world. We flash back to his original life as Bang Ho Young, a logistics warehouse worker. He's just finishing up a long shift and yawning. Looking out the window, Ho Young hopes his younger siblings got to school safely. It is a standard routine he has kept up ever since their parents passed away 3 years ago. Carrying a heavy box through the warehouse, he thinks about how his main priority in life is simply taking care of his siblings. Finally, it is lunch break. With some free time on his hands, Ho Young heads straight over to the break room to relax and get some food. As he sits down, he happily hums a tune, ready to boot up his absolute favorite mobile game. He opens up the app and waits for the loading screen to finish. This game is basically his only source of entertainment after a long day of hard work. Looking at the screen, he notices a bunch of players buying items. He smiles, getting ready to absolutely crush his daily quest for the day. He scrolls through his hero list, stopping on Shaman Bata, who has a unique skill that can convert enemy units into allies. Ho Young smiles to himself. Why waste resources recruiting troops when you can literally just seduce and brainwash your enemies instead? Genius strategy. A wild ogre suddenly appears on the screen, and Ho Young wastes no time tapping his screen to turn it into his loyal soldier. He repeatedly taps his phone screen, letting his shaman skill do all the heavy lifting in the battle. With his plan working perfectly, he just needs to convert a few more troll shamans to secure a flawless victory. The clear notification pops up on his screen. He ended the match with plenty of points, making it a very successful run. But just as he's about to log off, he notices something weird popping up on his screen. A blue notification window alerts him that a season-limited quest called Apocalypse Territory Defense has just been unlocked. Ho Young stares at it in confusion. In the game's lore, Apocalypse is supposed to be a city, not a territory. Something feels off. Suddenly, his eyes widen in complete shock as he reads the details of the quest. He cannot believe what he is seeing. The screen shows that players who clear this quest will have their accumulated points converted directly into real-world cash at a crazy exchange rate. On top of that, the game is offering a massive cash payout and 5 mythic-grade items upon completion. This is a literal goldmine. Ho Young does some quick math in his head. If he gets those 5 mythic items, he can sell them on the player market for an absolute fortune. With stars in his eyes, he starts laughing greedily. He's already imagining all the money he is about to make. But then he notices a warning stating that this is hardcore mode, meaning absolutely no retries are allowed if he loses. He looks at the global chat, which is completely blowing up with players screaming about how insanely generous this event is. Thinking about how much this money could help his siblings live a comfortable life, Ho Young confidently taps the participate button. As soon as he taps the screen, the notification glows brightly, and a strange electronic voice suddenly echoes in the room. Out of nowhere, a terrifying system message pops up announcing that super hardcore mode has been applied. Ho Young's heart completely drops. Ho Young looks around the empty break room in absolute terror, trying to find where the mysterious voice is coming from. The system brutally explains that if he fails this quest, not only will his game data be completely wiped, but he will literally die in real life. To make matters worse, the screen flashes with a warning that he cannot stop, pause, or give up on the quest. He is completely locked in. A terrifying, giant dragon face suddenly flashes on his phone screen, roaring with intense flames. The system delivers the final blow, telling him he cannot exit the game until the entire quest is completed. Suddenly, the world around him distorts, and Ho Young finds himself standing right in front of a colossal black dragon under a purple lightning storm. Before he can even process what is happening, a massive surge of blue magical energy swallows him whole as he screams in absolute terror. Joran is looking at his hands, trying to make sense of his new life. He realizes he has completely possessed the body of Joran Tamer, and this is the story of how he got stuck here. In this game world, humans can only be revived once through a priest, and when Joran's revival ritual happened, Ho Young's soul somehow hijacked his body. Now, instead of Joran's original overpowered skills, he is stuck with a weird skill called Pacify. Looking around, Joran questions the system about how time works in this world. A pop-up reveals that no matter how much time passes inside the game, reality remains completely frozen. The blue system screen greeting him as a guardian explains that time in his original world has stopped. If he successfully clears the quest, he will return exactly to the moment he was summoned. He stares at his hands, processing this insane information. So no matter how many years he spends grinding inside this fantasy world, back home, not a single second will have passed. Joran wonders if this means he can literally return straight to his lunch break when this is all over. Talk about the ultimate gaming speedrun. He lets out a massive sigh of relief. He was genuinely worried about who would take care of his younger siblings back home while he was gone. We cut to the military camp, where Joran is resting inside his tent after being appointed Baron of the Borderlands. Suddenly, someone from the outside calls out to him. A red-haired warrior woman named Lillian steps inside. As she approaches, a status window automatically floats over her head, showing off her stats. The system alerts him that Lillian is currently holding serious doubts and disappointment about how much her commander has changed. Joran nervously mutters that she is fine. Joran's sweat drops, trying to figure out how to act natural while these stats are literally staring him right in the face. He is deeply questioning how this UI works. Lillian points out that ever since they started marching to the capital, Joran has been muttering the words status window out loud like a total lunatic. She looks at him suspiciously, noting that she can't even see any status window unless he screams it out loud. Talk about an awkward misunderstanding. Joran is sweating bullets internally, realizing there is absolutely no way he can explain this sci-fi gaming mechanic to a medieval knight. Lillian's gaze softens as she looks down, asking him if he still remembers the very first time they met. Joran rubs his head, confident that he definitely remembers. Since he played this game and unlocked characters countless times, her backstory is practically engraved in his brain. Lillian stares directly at him, waiting for him to repeat the exact words he told her on that fateful day. We flash back to a younger Lillian sitting alone in a forest, crying her eyes out in absolute despair while a young Joran stands beside her. Joran gently placed his hand on her head, softly calling her name and telling her to follow him. He extended his hand to her with a warm smile, offering her a second chance at life and a place to belong. Young Lillian looked up at him through her tears, completely moved by his kindness. That was the exact moment her absolute loyalty to him was born. Back in the present, a soldier enters the tent to report, and Joran calmly nods, telling him he will head out shortly. Joran puts his hand on Lillian's shoulder, smiling warmly just like he did in the past. With ultimate charisma, he hits her with those legendary words, telling her they should go together. Lillian looks up at him with starry eyes, absolutely thrilled that her beloved commander hasn't forgotten their precious bond. Joran marches out to the training ground where his entire company of soldiers is lined up. A system note pops up, revealing their pacification levels are sitting at a mediocre 50. Joran realizes that on his first day of possession, their loyalty was over 90. His strange behavior must have caused their trust to completely tank. A mysterious green-haired entity hovers behind him as Joran rationalizes that it is a miracle they haven't deserted him yet, considering they are being sent straight into a monster den. Joran closes his eyes and mentally prays to the original soul of Joran Tamer. He begs the former charismatic noble to grant him some of his legendary eloquence and leadership. Stepping forward, Joran addresses his troops. When the nervous soldiers ask what will happen to their company, Joran tells them he has full authority over their personnel. The soldiers look visibly anxious, whispering about how terrifying it is to follow an exiled commander straight into a monster-infested wasteland. Joran clenches his fist on his sword, admitting that many other nobles are already mocking his miserable situation. He raises his voice, pointing out that forcing them to suffer in silence with him would be pointless, and that if he had secured a royal guard position, they would all be living in luxury. With passionate eyes, Joran yells to his men, declaring that if they are destined to face hardships, they should face them proudly together. He promises that if they choose to follow him, he will surely repay their hard work, even if they have to sleep in cold caves instead of cozy homes. The soldiers' faces light up with sudden inspiration. A notification flashes, announcing that his powerful speech has greatly increased his troops' pacification levels. Joran pushes his speech further, promising them that they will conquer and own a land so vast that even the founding king of the realm never possessed it. With a dramatic gesture, Joran tells anyone who is willing to follow him to step forward right now. The entire battalion raises their weapons and roars in unison, fully prepared to follow him to the literal edge of the continent. Watching his men cheer, Joran flashes a satisfied, smug smile. His leadership plan worked flawlessly. The system rewards him for his incredible speech, flashing a notification that his passive skill, Inspiration, has officially leveled up. We cut back to the royal palace as the Cold Queen looks down from her high throne, questioning why Joran has returned to the throne room. Kneeling before her once again, Joran formally requests that Her Majesty grant him a few personal attendants for his dangerous journey. The Queen looks at him with utter boredom, pointing out that she already gave him permission to draft and dispose of his current subordinates however he pleases. Joran boldly replies that since all his current troops are loyal soldiers of the crown, every single one of them has already volunteered to follow him. The Queen is completely stunned, wondering how he managed to convince a whole company to march to their doom. She tells him if he wants more workers, he should just hire mercenaries. Joran reveals his real master plan. He wants to take some of the kingdom's worst imprisoned criminals to his territory in exchange for offering them a royal pardon. We then find Joran walking through a dark, damp royal prison, introducing himself to the guard and demanding to release some prisoners. The prison guard looks at him like he has completely lost his mind, stuttering and asking if Joran meant to say visit instead of release. Joran holds up his royal permit, looking dead serious. He firmly repeats that he is indeed here to release them. The guard laughs nervously and brings Joran to the first cell, pointing out a notorious criminal sentenced to 15 years for robbery. Joran takes one look at the guy's stats and immediately notices they are complete garbage. He instantly realizes this shady guard is trying to dump all his worst trash prisoners onto him. Joran calls out the guard's obvious scheme, while the guard sweats bullets and desperately denies trying to trick him. Walking away, Joran sighs, thinking that finding high-quality allies in a standard prison cell might have been a bit too optimistic. Suddenly, Joran freezes as he passes a heavily guarded cell, his eyes locking onto a mysterious figure sitting inside. He reads the prisoner's file on Rabia, a high priest accused of double murder, despite only one victim actually dying. Joran asks her how that is even mathematically possible. Turning to the guard, Joran asks him if doppelgangers are legally considered human in this world. The guard answers that of course they are human, they are monsters that simply mimic human skin. Rubia suddenly cuts in, furiously demanding why they accuse her of murder then. She locks eyes with Joran, claiming with pure anger that what she killed was not a human being, but a monstrous beast. Rubia slams her hands against the iron bars, shouting that anyone who kidnaps children and sells them to dark mages is a monster, no matter what kind of skin they wear. She looks back at Joran with absolute fury, declaring that the target of her wrath fully deserved to die. Joran is impressed, telling her that her logic makes complete sense. He then asks her if she knows why she had to kill that bastard twice. He looks at her calmly, explaining that it is because doppelgangers can only be killed twice before their physical form is permanently destroyed. Rubia's face breaks into a chilling, wicked grin as she agrees with Joran's cold-blooded reasoning. With red glowing eyes, she admits that if she could have revived that subhuman monster 100 times, she would have happily killed him 100 times more. A system screen suddenly flashes, revealing that Rubia is a rare 4-star priest. The system strongly advises Joran to recruit her immediately since his squad is sorely lacking a healer. Joran looks at her impressive stats, realizing that while she is clearly unstable and highly dangerous, her raw magical power is exactly what he needs. Clearing his throat, Joran introduces himself properly and asks Rubia if she'd be willing to lend her divine strength to his new territory. He offers her a sweet deal, promising to appoint her as his official chaplain and grant her special honorary citizenship with unique privileges. Rubia looks at him in complete shock, not expecting a high noble to offer someone like her a position of such high authority. Joran leans in close to the bars and whispers the ultimate hook. He will give her the absolute legal right to personally punish the guilty. That was exactly what she wanted to hear. Rubia flashes a satisfied smile and accepts his offer, ready to leave her dark cell behind. With their contract sealed, Joran shakes her hand through the prison bars, officially welcoming a powerful and terrifying high priest to tame her territory. Joran continues his dungeon tour and enters a strange, narrow hallway. He asks the guard why the ceiling is so much lower in this specific area. The guard explains that they are currently in the containment zone for short species like dwarves and halflings, which makes complete sense. Joran is instantly intrigued. He didn't expect the royal prison to hold different fantasy species alongside standard human criminals. He stops in front of a cell containing a young halfling boy. Joran asks what kind of crime a little kid like this could have possibly committed to get 7 years. The guard replies that the kid is in for theft, prompting Joran to ask what valuable treasure he actually stole. The halfling boy explains with a straight face that since he couldn't live with his beloved under one roof, he decided to steal her literal house deed instead. The guard is absolutely speechless at his logic. Joran facepalms, completely dumbfounded by this logic. He decides to ignore the bizarre backstory and check the kid's stats instead. The system window pops up, revealing the kid's name is Banal. He is a 2-star character with the Dungeon Mercenary class. The system details reveal that Banal is an expert scout specializing in finding hidden traps inside dungeons. Joran realizes this kid is actually insanely useful. Looking at the halfling, Joran starts cooking up a clever way to convince him to join his newly formed team. Banal sits in his cell looking completely bored and utterly exhausted by prison life. He starts complaining loudly about how terrible the prison food is, claiming even goblins would refuse to eat it, and begs to be let out so he can escape the forced labor. Joran smiles, realizing the kid cares more about food than anything else. He decides to use a classic gastronomic strategy. Joran promises to get Banal out of prison. He guarantees that while he cannot promise luxury, his company's private chef is so skilled that every meal will be delicious. Banal's eyes instantly light up. He admits that while they can buy outside food if they have cash, the prison food is truly unbearable. To prove his point, Joran cheerfully asks the guard what tonight's prison special is. The guard proudly lists fermented sardine jelly and slime cold dish. Banal's face completely drops in disgust as the guard continues listing black bread and minotaur bone soup. The kid has reached his absolute limit. Without hesitating for another second, Banal yells at the top of his lungs that he will go to whatever territory Joran wants. Joran smiles warmly, officially welcoming the newly recruited halfling scout to his team. Next, we learn about Joran's personal property. He has a giant, luxurious mansion he received as a reward for monster subjugation a few years ago. Since he was always away on official business, he barely got to spend any time enjoying his massive estate. When he arrives, he recalls that the estate originally came with several employees, including a butler and a maid. But as soon as the butler heard they were relocating to the monster-infested Apocalypse City, he packed his bags and bolted. Joran sighs, wondering if the remaining maid is going to be just as much of a headache to deal with. We flash back to 4 years ago, showing a younger Joran riding on a horse near a desert area. He asked his soldiers about a group of hostages they had just rescued from a brutal bandit gang. The soldier pointed out a quiet, pink-haired girl who was sitting on the ground, refusing to leave even though they had freed her. Realizing she had absolutely nowhere else to go, Joran felt a deep sense of pity for her. He walked up to the young girl and softly told her that they should go together, offering her a fresh start. The young pink-haired girl looked up at him, completely silent but deeply moved by his sudden kindness. Back in the present, Joran remembers that the little girl he saved back then is his current maid. Looking around the grand estate, he mutters that the house would sell for a fortune. With a playful smirk, he asks out loud if he should just sell the entire mansion off to fund his journey. Suddenly, his pink-haired maid, Peach, bursts into tears, crying that her master is trying to sell her off. Joran frantically clarifies that he is selling the actual house, not her. Peach lets out a huge sigh of relief, admitting she thought he was sending her away. Joran opens her stats, and a system note reveals her loyalty is so high she would follow him to the edge of the world. Joran's sweat drops, thanking Peach for her intense dedication to him. Suddenly, Peach flashes a chilling, blank smile, whispering that if her master ever dares to abandon her, she will chase him beyond the end of the world. A system notification pops up warning him that attempting to fire her requires a massive amount of points and has a near impossible success rate. Joran decides she is definitely staying. He sighs, thinking about how awkward it is to be called master by a young girl who is literally the exact same age as his younger sister back in the real world. Peach notices his strange expression and asks if he is feeling unwell, looking deeply concerned. Suddenly, she wraps her arms around Joran from behind, hugging him tightly and muttering that people often suffer from bad headaches after a revival. Joran gasps for air, yelling at her to get away because she is literally suffocating him. Peach immediately pouts dramatically, complaining about how harsh he is being to someone who is just trying to look after him. Joran tells her to just take a step back and firmly requests that she stop calling him master once and for all. Peach looks incredibly hurt, claiming that he will always be her master and asking if he has forgotten her feelings now that he is a high noble. Joran finally gives up and sits down, agreeing to let her call him whatever she wants as long as she promises to follow his direct orders. He tells her that while he is grateful she wants to follow him to his new territory, there are some serious things she needs to understand first. He looks at her with an extremely serious and stern expression, wanting to make sure she isn't taking this lightly. He explains that they are absolutely not going on a fun picnic. The road is incredibly dangerous, and where they are going is basically a massive monster den. He warns her that the peaceful, cozy life she enjoyed in this mansion will completely vanish, and she will have to do exhausting physical labor every single day. Joran points out that he has no intention of forcing her to go, offering her the choice to stay behind and comfortably guard the mansion. He gives her a final choice, either stay in the safety of this house or prepare herself for the worst hardships of her life. He stands firm, waiting to see if she will actually welcome him back here or choose to follow him into the danger. Suddenly, a bright blue notification flashes in front of his eyes. The system rewards him with 20 points for successfully unlocking a secret relationship achievement. Joran stares at the screen with wide eyes, completely shocked by the sudden achievement unlock. Before he can even react, Peach clasps her hands together with hard eyes, happily cheering that she will follow her beloved master absolutely anywhere. Peach is still overjoyed about the contract, screaming at the top of her lungs that she will follow her beloved master anywhere and do absolutely anything for him. A system notification pops up showing Peach's pacification level and mental strength have shot up significantly. Joran politely welcomes her to tame her territory, telling her they can negotiate her salary once they actually catch a few monsters. We cut to the open road under a beautiful blue sky, where Joran is struggling on horseback. He groans in annoyance, wondering why on earth this stubborn animal will not listen to a word he says. The brown warhorse turns its head and looks back at Joran with a comically smug, sassy look on its face. It is basically saying, "You don't own me, buddy." Joran pulls up the horse's stats, which explain that the warhorse's sharp animal instincts have detected that its master has somehow changed. The system suggests he can instantly tame it by spending 5 of his precious points. Joran looks extremely stressed and sweaty. He grumbles to himself about what an absolute waste of points that would be, determined to tame this beast the hard way. Lillian rides up beside him and points out how strangely he is riding, noting that the former Joran used to basically live in the saddle. Joran nervously changes the subject, deciding he should probably give the horse a name. He clenches the reins and looks down thoughtfully. He decides to name the stubborn horse Ma Young, hoping it might actually start showing him some respect now. Amazingly, the horse lets out a happy neigh and instantly follows his next command to sit. Talk about a complete 100. Lillian stares at them with a blank, sweat-dropping expression while Joran sits proudly on the sitting horse. The system chimes in, confirming that naming the sensitive animal has given a massive boost to its loyalty. With his newly tamed mount fully cooperative, Joran flashes a confident smile and tells everyone it is finally time to move out. The narration box explains that thanks to blessings along the way, no weak monsters dare to approach their caravan. But despite the peaceful ride, Joran is already exhausted by the never-ending road. He slumps on his horse, complaining to himself about how this damn path seems to stretch on forever with absolutely no end in sight. Lillian rides up close beside him and softly calls out to her lord, catching his attention. She tells him she has some crucial information to share. Joran looks at her, realizing she was staring at him earlier because she had something important to say, and not for some suspicious reason. Lillian explains that while Joran was busy making various preparations back at the estate, she was busy gathering intel from the locals. Joran gently scolds her, asking why she wasn't resting like he had ordered before this brutal journey. Lillian politely apologizes for disobeying his rest order. She then delivers the bad news, informing him that monsters are reportedly starting to appear on the main road leading to Rainfa. Lillian looks extremely serious as she delivers the report, letting him know the threat is highly active. Joran reacts in total shock, demanding to know how and why monsters are suddenly spawning on a major travel route. Lillian warns him that it is definitely not just a baseless rumor. She adds that she literally saw royal troops departing to secure the road leading to the western plains, confirming the gravity of the situation. Joran's face drops as he curses his terrible luck, having hoped for a peaceful and comfortable journey. Lillian looks at him, asking what his next move is. She stares at him intently, waiting for her commander's strategic decision. Joran closes his eyes in deep thought. Lillian points out that they need to decide right now whether to force their way through the monster-infested road or take a long detour. Right on cue, a giant blue system window pops up, warning him that his next choice will completely determine the future of their entire journey. The screen lays out his two choices. He can go directly via the road to fight monsters for rare items and recruits, or take a long resource-draining detour to play it safe. Joran weighs his options, torn between high-risk adventure and slow safety. He turns to Lillian to ask for her input. Lillian is completely stunned by his question, pointing out that this is the absolute first time in history her lord has ever asked a subordinate for their opinion. She quickly composes herself and promises to follow whatever path he chooses, advising him to make the decision himself. However, she leans in and strongly suggests that it might be best to keep this monster news a secret from the rest of the caravan. Joran looks back at the transport carriages trailing behind them, asking her why they should keep it quiet. Lillian explains that spreading news of a monster threat will instantly tank their group's morale and cause mass panic, especially among the civilian workers. But Joran points out that they still have to tell the truth to the porters eventually, regardless of which route they take. Lillian gets flustered, realizing she got a bit too worked up over her advice. She quickly apologizes for overstepping, but Joran reassures her that her points are completely valid and that he would also prefer to keep the peace. Lillian looks down, claiming she let her personal anxieties get the better of her, but admits that as a leader, she felt it was her duty to speak up. Joran looks at her with respect, pointing out that if they encounter monsters completely out of nowhere without warning, the caravan will panic even harder. He believes a true leader has to carry that responsibility. With his decision made, Joran raises his hand and commands the entire caravan to halt, preparing to address his people. He stands tall on his horse, shouting out a loud order to freeze the march immediately. He boldly announces to the entire crowd that according to recent reports, monsters are actively appearing on the road heading to the western plains. The porters instantly begin whispering in fear, but one of the guards laughs it off, telling the sergeant to think of it as a fun warm-up exercise. Rubia flashes a confident, slightly psychotic smile, cheering that she was worried this long journey was going to be boring anyway. Meanwhile, the cowardly halfling Banal peeks out of his carriage in sheer terror, grumbling that he probably should have just stayed in prison. Before the panic can spread, Lillian steps forward and bellows a deafening yell for everyone to quiet down. The heavily armored guards back her up, warning the crowd that anyone who interrupts the Baron before he finishes speaking will be charged with insubordination. Joran calmly addresses the crowd, explaining that he has decided to take the main road anyway because taking a detour doesn't guarantee they will avoid monsters. He looks back at the frightened porters, reassures them that as their employer, he personally guarantees their complete safety. He notes that wild beasts and bandits exist on detours anyway. He tells them they are legally free to break their contract right now, but warns them that they are much safer sticking with his highly trained soldiers. His incredibly charismatic speech works wonders, leveling up his passive inspiration skill and calming the porters down, though a lingering tension remains. One of the porters speaks up, admitting they understand his logic, but boldly asks if they can get a little raise, essentially demanding hazard pay for the dangerous route. A massive red system prompt pops up, announcing a new branch choice. He can either pay them to boost loyalty but anger his soldiers, or refuse and risk a work strike. Joran is completely speechless. Joran clenches his jaw, screaming internally about why the game is forcing him to choose between two terrible options. He cannot believe his soldiers would get jealous over porter pay. He looks back at his grumbling troops, realizing they would probably feel neglected and unappreciated if only the civilian porters got a cash bonus. He thinks back to how he handled his maid Peach earlier, recalling that the system's default choices are almost always garbage. He realizes that a true gamer doesn't just blindly follow the prompts. He has to think outside the box and create his own secret third option. Joran turns to the porters with a confident smile, offering them a highly lucrative alternative deal. He promises that if any monsters attack and they successfully defeat them, he will share a generous portion of the valuable loot directly with the porters as compensation. In exchange, he requests that they actively cooperate with the soldiers during battles by building defensive barricades and traps. The head porter's eyes light up. He happily accepts the deal, promising that they will work their absolute hardest. Joran smiles as a hidden system notice reveals that his custom deal has prioritized monster rewards for the soldiers first. The soldiers are absolutely hyped, feeling incredibly proud that their new commander is putting his own retainers first, instead of treating them like faceless mercenaries. Joran addresses his troops, declaring that unlike the regular country soldiers who get nothing, they are his personal retainers. He raises a clenched fist, shouting that those who defeat monsters will not only protect their home, but also amass incredible personal wealth under his rule. The system flashes a massive blue victory screen, praising him for finding a brilliant solution outside the given choices and giving a colossal boost to everyone's loyalty. The entire caravan lets out a deafening roar of absolute excitement, raising their weapons and chanting praises for their lord at the top of their lungs. The caravan finally arrives at the West Plains outpost, a sturdy outpost surrounded by dense forest. Joran questions the local outpost guards, asking if it is true that a monster-infested village is located right next to their main travel route. The guard gravely confirms the rumors, stating trolls have been sighted just a few stops away. The guard mentions they were given strict official orders to keep a lookout and prevent any passing merchant caravans from being ambushed. Joran nods seriously, instructing the guard to instantly alert him if any urgent news arrives from the borderlands. Later that evening, Joran is resting on the soft grass, when Peach walks up behind him and asks if her master is feeling tired. She playfully reaches her hands out, clearly hoping to give him a shoulder massage to ease his stress. Joran immediately shuts her down, telling her to stop with the cheesy acting and go get some rest herself. Peach pouts, complaining about how incredibly harsh she is being. As she walks away, Peach wonders why her master feels so different lately, speculating that his personality change might be a side effect of his recent resurrection ritual. Joran panics internally, realizing he has to keep his guard up. He makes a funny face and reminds her that he cannot give her special treatment just because she is his personal maid. Despite the cold rejection, Peach is determined to stick by his side. She tells herself that for now, she will keep following him on her own 2 feet, but vows that one day she will be riding right next to him in a carriage. Near the campfire, the other soldiers are nervously debating the rumors. They cannot comprehend how monsters could possibly appear on the main highway of all places. One soldier points out that the Podwin Highway was blessed by the 4 legendary angels, meaning monsters shouldn't even be able to get close to it. Suddenly, Rubia walks up to the soldier's campfire, holding a wooden pipe and casually asking if anyone has a light. A rookie soldier nervously hands her a flame, totally intimidated by the priestess's presence. Rubia inhales deeply and blows out a puff of smoke, casually greeting the young rookie. She smiles, asking them if they are genuinely curious about why the highway's holy blessing is suddenly failing to keep monsters away. She points out that if the gods and angels are going to grant a blessing, they should actually see it through to the end, rather than giving a cheap buff and completely abandoning their duties. The rookie soldier looks terrified by her sacrilegious talk, but Rubia laughs it off. She jokingly tells him not to worry because even if she gets struck by lightning for her words, she will not die. She adds with a creepy smile that if she does get struck and burned to a crisp, the soldiers just need to resurrect her and sweep her ashes into a nice little box. The soldiers are completely horrified. The soldiers sweat nervously, staring at the sky and praying that they do not actually get hit by a divine lightning bolt because of her crazy jokes. Rubia sits down on the grass, grumbling that if the angels were actually doing their jobs properly, they would be striking down the nearby monsters instead of worrying about a delinquent priestess. Seeing Joran walk up, she holds out her pipe with a mischievous smile, asking her lord if he would care to join her for a puff. Joran stares at the pipe, realizing this is a great chance to build rapport with his powerful but unstable new healer. He takes a puff, thinking about how his younger siblings would absolutely throw a massive fit if they saw him smoking a pipe right now. Joran exhales a cloud of smoke, admitting that the tobacco actually tastes pretty good. Rubia smugly replies that it is a rare blend imported directly from Montalia. She smiles warmly, appreciating how remarkably straightforward and easy to talk to her new master is compared to other stuffy nobles. As Joran stares into space, he reminds himself of his reality. The game world and his real life have connected for some bizarre reason, and there is absolutely no way he can explain this sci-fi nightmare to these fantasy characters. Rubia continues chatting, pointing out that even magic street lamps need to be recharged every single year, so expecting a 500-year-old angelic blessing to work forever is just greedy. She suddenly asks why his parents didn't join him on this journey. Joran casually replies that they'd tragically passed away in an accident a few years ago. Rubia looks slightly sympathetic and asks if they were brutally killed by monsters. Joran's eye turns cold as he explains that yes, they were indeed killed by a monster, a 4-time repeat convict hit-and-run driver who does not deserve to be called human. Rubia looks at him in silence, realizing they both carry a deep-seated hatred for human monsters who deserve no mercy. She softly notes that they seem to have quite a bit in common. Joran flashes a warm, sincere smile, telling her they should focus on working well together to survive the dangers ahead. The next day, Joran is leading the caravan through the thick forest. Suddenly, he raises his arm and loudly commands the entire group to halt. Lillian rides up beside him in a panic, asking her lord what is wrong. A blue system prompt appears, warning him that a new subquest has just been issued. Joran narrows his eyes, whispering the name of their upcoming threat, Mandrakarani. He remembers fighting these annoying pests countless times during his gaming days. The system displays a picture of the Mandragorani, describing it as a deer-like monster that screams like a mandrake, inflicting a massive movement and attack speed debuff on anyone who hears its cry. Joran panics slightly, realizing his first defense mission is to protect their fragile baggage carriages, but the system hasn't even warned him where the monsters will spawn. Suddenly, Joran notices a strange rustling sound in the bushes, realizing with horror that there is absolutely no wind blowing right now. He quickly turns to his troops, shouting that the Mandragorani are extremely close and ordering them to form a defensive line with their spears immediately. The disciplined soldiers instantly shout in unison, taking up defensive positions around the baggage carriages. Joran barks out a critical order, telling Peach and the porters to immediately soak cotton in water and plug the soldiers' ears with it. He commands the second and third squads to follow him, spreading out to form a wide search line through the forest. He spots a suspicious bush and commands Banal to throw a heady rock straight into the western shrubbery to flush the monsters out. The agile halfling winds up and hurls a stone deep into the thick foliage with perfect accuracy. The rock hits its target, causing a massive deer-like monster with wooden antlers to angrily burst out of the bushes. Joran's eyes widen in shock as he gets a clear look at the terrifying creature, muttering under his breath at its massive size. The Mandragorani opens its fanged mouth wide and lets out an ear-piercing, blood-curdling scream that echoes violently through the trees. Despite the terrifying roar, Joran draws his sword and commands his cavalry to charge straight at the beast. But as his horse gallops forward at full speed, a sudden, horrifying realization washes over him. He looks completely dazed and sweaty as he realizes that while Joran was a legendary knight, he, Bang Ho Young, has literally never swung a real sword in his entire life. Talk about an absolute disaster. As the charge begins, Joran realized he is in deep trouble. He panics, wondering if he should just pretend to lose control of his horse and subtly stop moving to avoid fighting. But he immediately throws that idea out the window, realizing that pulling a cowardly stunt like that will definitely earn him suspicious looks from his highly vigilant soldiers. Suddenly, the massive Mandragorani deer monster lets out an ear-splitting screech, causing the frontline soldiers to cover their ears in absolute agony. The system details reveal that even with cotton plugged in their ears, the soldiers are still heavily debuffed. Joran looks around in surprise, realizing that for some strange reason, the terrifying sound isn't affecting him at all. A helpful blue notification window pops up, revealing that his secret trait, Heard It A Lot, Deer, has been successfully activated. Since Joran spent his real-world military service listening to annoying deer screams, he has built a natural immunity to this attack. But the system brutally adds a final warning, noting that this immunity absolutely does not apply to any other verbal attacks. Shaking off the initial shock, Joran screams at Rubia to quickly cast her divine protection magic to calm down their panicking horses. The wild deer's screech continues to echo violently through the forest, driving the nearby mounts completely wild with fear. Ma Young, Joran's newly tamed horse, rears up on its hind legs, completely losing its mind from the sonic attack. Joran desperately tries to cling to the saddle, completely out of his depth as the horse bucks and thrashes around violently. The horse takes off into a wild, uncontrollable sprint. Joran desperately screams at the beast to halt, but it completely ignores him. He holds on for dear life as the crazed horse charges directly toward the center of the battlefield at breakneck speed. The horse violently bucks, kicking its hind legs high into the air and launching Joran straight out of the saddle. With absolutely no control over his body, Joran goes flying headfirst through the forest canopy like a human cannonball. His foot slips completely out of the stirrup, and he hurtles through the air in absolute terror, racing for a brutal impact. He lets out a loud, high-pitched scream as he falls through the branches, convinced he's about to die a hilarious death on his first mission. But instead of crashing onto the hard dirt, Joran lands with incredible speed directly on top of the giant Mandragorani boss monster. Joran looks up in absolute daze, trying to figure out if he actually survived that insane fall. A massive dust cloud rises as we see the giant deer monster completely crushed beneath Joran's heavy armor. The system congratulates him on securing a spectacular first kill. The screen flashes, letting Joran know that he has earned some valuable kill points and unlocked the legendary First Blood achievement. He is also awarded 5 additional points for successfully taking out the enemy leader right at the very start of the battle. Talk about falling into a massive victory. Joran sits on the dead boss, sweating nervously. Suddenly, he hears a strange noise and looks up to see several smaller mandragorani deer circling him. Instead of attacking, the confused deer tilt their heads and let out soft, gentle noises, completely lost now that their leader has been squashed. The soldiers rush forward, yelling to protect their lord, but Joran stares at his sword, panicking internally because the only thing he has ever swung in his life is a cheap kitchen knife. Lillian commands the squads to secure the perimeter, ready to slaughter the remaining beasts. Joran quickly pulls up the remaining deer monster's stats. The screen reveals that these mandragorani are actually very peaceful creatures that simply want to graze on grass, but have been driven mad by their leader's death. The system notes that because of their gentle nature, Joran has a high 40% success rate to instantly tame them without spending any points. Joran raises his glowing hand, calling out his signature skill, Pacify. The spell works perfectly. The system announces that 2 of the mandragorani have successfully become his loyal allies, waiting for his direct commands. With his new allies secured, Joran stands tall and commands his deers to let out a massive, vigorous battle cry forward. The 2 tamed deer open their mouths and let out a deafening screech directly toward the remaining wild monsters. The sonic wave blasts through the forest, disorienting the enemy lines and leaving them completely open to attack. The soldiers waste no time, charging forward and easily cutting down the debuffed wild monsters. Joran is absolutely thrilled, realizing his pacification strategy works exactly like it did in his favorite mobile game. A system notification explains that his tamed deers are completely immune to each other's screeches, and their cries actually apply massive attack buffs to their allies. Joran charges into the fray himself, swinging his sword and realizing that simple swordsmanship is surprisingly easy once you get the hang of it. As he slashes through the monsters, Joran is shocked to find that the heavy iron sword feels as light as a feather in his hands. He smiles, realizing it is not that the sword is unusually light, it is that his newly possessed body is incredibly, ridiculously strong. Joran is confused, knowing that while Joran Tamer was a strong knight, he shouldn't possess this kind of superhuman power since he doesn't have royal blood. A system notification clears up the mystery, explaining that due to an incomplete possession glitch, Joran's original real-world physical stats have been added on top of Joran's knight stats. The system simply explains that Joran's maximum physical strength is now about 3 times more powerful than a normal human's. He is officially a gigachad. Joran looks at his hands, deeply questioning what kind of crazy trait this is, wondering if he and the original Joran have literally fused into a super soldier. A wild deer leaps out of the bushes, and Joran easily cleaves it in half with a single, effortless swing of his glowing blade. Joran looks back at his 2 newly tamed deers and commands them to charge forward and attack the remaining enemies. He points his sword toward the wild monsters, shouting at his deer allies to get in on the action. But the 2 tamed deers just stand there, slowly shaking their heads side to side. They refuse to attack, muttering that they cannot bring themselves to hurt their own kin. Joran's sweat drops in complete disbelief. This peaceful rebellion never happened in the game's lore, leaving him to wonder if their loyalty is simply too low. The cute deers look up at him innocently, completely ignoring his commands and refusing to budge. Suddenly, a wild monster leaps out at them, and Lillian comes flying through the air with a loud battle cry. She dives forward with her heavy spear, looking incredibly epic and powerful. With a single, brutal thrust, Lillian pierces the wild beast right through the chest, ending its rampage instantly. The nearby soldiers groan in pain, complaining that the constant screeching is heavily draining their physical strength. Joran quickly barks out tactical advice, telling his men to aim directly for the neck, pointing out that cutting the neck prevents the deers from letting out their debuff scream. A wild deer tries to scream, but Joran's advice works perfectly as a soldier swiftly silences it with a clean strike. Joran then turns back to his tamed deers, coordinating their attacks by telling number 9 to scream while ordering number 8 to hold back. Right on cue, number 9 lets out a massive screech, completely disorienting the approaching wild monsters. Joran cheers at their perfect timing. The wild monsters are completely stunned by the sonic blast, unable to defend themselves as the soldiers move in. Joran continues playing coordinator, commanding number 8 to let out its cry while telling number 9 to stand down. The second deer screeches, locking the enemies in a continuous loop of devastating debuffs. The remaining wild monsters are completely overwhelmed, stumbling and falling to the ground in total defeat. With the battle nearly won, Joran runs forward with Lillian, telling her he will explain his tactics later, but strictly orders her to spare the 2 remaining deers that have separated from the herd. The 2 young wild deers are huddled together on the grass, shaking in fear. Joran watches them, but suddenly notices something strange and turns his head around in alarm. He spots the rest of the wild herd sprinting away through the trees. His eyes widen as he realizes the escaping monsters are heading straight toward their vulnerable caravan. He screams at everyone to chase them down immediately. To catch up with the runaway monsters, Joran desperately calls for his tamed deer, number 8, to come over and give him a quick ride. Number 8 looks back at him in complete confusion, sweat dropping as Joran explains the language barrier and barks an order for the deer to lie down so he can mount. Lillian is completely flabbergasted, staring at her lord in absolute disbelief. She cannot believe her eyes as Joran literally hops onto the back of a wild forest monster. Joran notes that when there is no horse, a mandragorny will have to do. He flashes a confident smile, ready to make the best of this bizarre substitute mount. He grips the antlers and charges ahead, galloping through the forest on a deer like an absolute madman. Back at the transport carriages, the defensive guards shout at everyone to secure their positions as the wild monsters approach. The wild deer herd charges the barricades, but Banal is already waiting on top of a carriage, ready to throw heavy rocks. The halfling scout yells with smug confidence, telling the beasts they picked the absolute wrong caravan to mess with. He hurls a massive stone, hitting the lead wild deer square in the face and sending it reeling. The heavy rock completely knocks out the charging monster, stopping its momentum instantly. The rest of the wild herd begins to panic as more rocks rain down from the carriages, disrupting their coordinated charge. Watching the battle unfold, one of the porters grumbles that Joran might be more cowardly than he looks, assuming their lord fled and left them to defend the baggage alone. But Rubia is already stepping forward, clasps her hands together, and begins chanting a high-level divine spell to protect the caravan. She channels her immense holy magic, calling upon her deity to safeguard the weak. Massive golden magic circles begin to glow intensely on the ground right beneath the charging monsters, throwing Peach and the porters back in surprise. The magical energy surges upward, trapping the wild deer in a series of violent divine explosions. Rubia's eyes glow with a chilling red light as she commands her holy spell to burst forth with maximum power. Pillars of searing holy light rain down from the heavens, completely decimating the wild herd. The monsters let out agonized screeches as the divine magic blasts through their ranks, leaving them completely vulnerable. Joran finally rides back into the camp on his deer, commanding his soldiers to hold the barricades and block the monsters' escape route. The remaining wild deer are completely disoriented, unable to fight back against the reinforced defenses. With the battle finished, the soldiers corral the surviving monsters into a secure wooden pen. Joran walks up to the corral and jokingly welcomes the deer, telling them their new pen is basically going to be a cozy deer ranch. He points out a nearby carriage, noting that they do not even need a standard battle wagon when they have a modified cart equipped with massive steel spikes. He shows off the devastating spike wagon, completely satisfied with his tactical setup. Joran grins at one of the wild deer with a negative pacification level, asking if it wants to officially become his livestock. The wild deer glares at him, letting out an angry hiss as Joran draws his blade, bidding farewell to the uncooperative beast. He swiftly dispatches the aggressive monster, keeping only the ones that show potential. He stops in front of a deer with a positive pacification level, promising to be lenient and spare its life if it agrees to behave. The deer happily nods in agreement. Joran welcomes his newest recruit to tamer territory. He thinks to himself that this is basically like pulling a rare item in a gacha game, and that killing all these monsters would have been a total waste. With a mischievous smile, he mutters to himself that he's going to work his new monster allies to the bone. Lillian runs up to him, commanding the soldiers to spare the captured beasts, and anxiously asks Joran if he is all right. Joran smiles, assuring her that he is completely fine and didn't get hurt. But Lillian glares at him, clarifying that she isn't asking about physical injuries, she is asking if his actual brain is functioning properly. She asks him if he went completely crazy from his resurrection after effects, demanding to know how he could casually invite wild monsters into their caravan. The nearby soldiers are also highly agitated, whispering in fear about the dangers of keeping wild mandragorny alive. A system warning pops up, alerting Joran that his troops' loyalty is rapidly dropping and that he needs to convince them immediately. Joran scratches his head in frustration. He knows they are right, but he already has a brilliant plan to win them over. He looks down at his glove, which is covered in incredibly soft, fluffy deer fur from his ride earlier. He realizes the high-quality fur and antlers of these creatures could actually be extremely valuable and useful for his territory. Joran addresses the worried crowd, asking them to listen carefully. He reminds them all that he is a resurrected soul. He flashes a friendly smile, trying to ease their tension. He lies through his teeth, explaining that as a side effect of his resurrection, he awakened a rare divine ability. He calls it monster pacification, the power to turn dangerous beasts into loyal human allies, and commands number 8 and number 9 to step forward. The two tamed deer slowly shuffle forward, looking incredibly nervous under the soldiers' intense gazes. The system warns Joran that his new pets are terrified of the humans, advising him to comfort them first. Joran pats their heads, promising them that if they follow his orders, they will get plenty of delicious hay instead of wet grass. The deers happily accept the deal. To show off his control, Joran commands number 8 to lie down and stick out its tongue, while ordering number 9 to balance on 2 legs. The deers perform the tricks flawlessly. Joran dismisses them to rest, leaving the soldiers completely speechless as they realize their lord's magical ability is actually real. The guards watch the deers walk away peacefully, amazed that wild monsters are actually behaving like trained dogs. Lillian takes advantage of the moment, pointing out that thanks to these tamed deers, their battle was an absolute breeze. She adds that these monsters will be incredibly useful for carrying heavy luggage and weakening future enemies, pointing to their magical antlers. Joran holds up an antler, explaining that boiling these horns and leaves produces a powerful medicine that dramatically accelerates strength recovery. He commands Peach to bring some hot water so they can brew a fresh batch of strength recovery tea right now. Joran calls out a tired soldier named Yak, asking if it is true that he has been waking up frequently, sweating, and suffering from stomach issues. Yak is completely shocked. Yak stammers, asking his lord how on earth he could possibly know about his private health issues. Joran chuckles, telling him his status window revealed everything and hands him a warm cup of the boiled antler tea. He tells Yak to just trust him and drink it, promising to take full responsibility if anything goes wrong. Yak takes a slow sip, tasting the strange herbal brew. As soon as the tea hits his system, Yak's eyes fly open and his body begins to glow with an intense, warm, magical energy as all of his fatigue instantly vanishes. After drinking the boiled antler tea, Yak looks down at his hands in complete shock. He cannot believe how quickly his painful joints and severe fatigue have completely vanished. The surrounding soldiers watch in awe, realizing their lord's words were 100% true. Yak is so excited that Rubia has to politely tell him he is fondling his own hands a bit too much. Rubia smiles warmly, gently taking Yak's hands and teasing him about how incredibly soft his skin has become. Yak blushes furiously, completely caught off guard. Joran hands a bunch of cut antlers to Kadegel, telling him to share these valuable materials with the rest of the troops to heal their chapped hands. He explains that these horns can fetch a fortune in the eastern continent. He looks back at his troops, asking them how amazing it would be if they could secure a permanent, reliable source of these precious healing materials. Joran grins at his 2 tamed deers, telling them they will just have to trim their antlers regularly from now on. The deers look slightly nervous but obediently nod in agreement. Joran addresses the rest of the caravan, pointing out that taming monsters is actually a proud tradition. He reminds them of ancient princes who rode majestic griffons and fought alongside dragons. Rubia looks at him thoughtfully, pointing out that if reforming human criminals is already incredibly difficult, wouldn't taming wild monsters be even harder? Joran confidently tells her not to worry, explaining that his special ability allows him to see a numerical stat called the pacification level. He promises to handle any monster that acts out. Rubia flashes a slightly dark, enthusiastic smile, admitting that sounds like a lot of fun. She has actually been wanting to try her hand at punishing sinful monsters for a long time. Joran turns to the caged deers and firmly asks them if they promise never to attack humans again. The deers quickly nod and squeak in agreement. He explains the deal is simple. They provide manual labor for tamer territory, and in exchange, he will provide comfortable shelter and delicious food. The deers happily agree, and a system notification pops up, rewarding Joran with 10 points for successfully completing the taming contract. The system flashes again, informing Joran that his main skill, pacification, has officially leveled up from level 2 to level 4. Joran looks back at his caravan and asks if anyone still has any objections to bringing these helpful beasts along with them. The crowd is dead silent. A blue quest completion window pops up, awarding Joran a perfect grade and 13 kill points for defeating the monsters with 0 human casualties. Joran realizes that just like in the original game, pacifying monsters doesn't award as many direct points as killing them, but he is more than happy with the long-term benefits. He turns to his cheering caravan, thanking everyone for their hard work and celebrating their safe victory. The crowd roars, chanting praises for their lord. Later that night, Joran looks at a large piece of raw mandragorani meat, wondering if monster meat is actually safe to eat. Lillian suggests they should probably burn the monster carcasses to prevent other beasts from being attracted to the smell. Joran tells her they are going to cook the meat on the stove instead. He firmly promises his troops that he would never feed them anything he wouldn't eat himself. The exhausted soldiers rest around the campfire, happily drinking the hot antler tea and praising its rich, refreshing taste. A system window evaluates the skills of Cook Sergeant Jerry, noting that while his meals are incredibly nutritious and delicious, his presentation is severely lacking. Essentially, the system is saying Jerry's cooking tastes amazing but looks like absolute garbage. Joran decided he needs to step in. Before they eat, Rubia offers a solemn prayer, asking the angels to purge any stupid parasites and sins from the monster meat. Jerry stares at the raw, bloody meat on the chopping board, deeply skeptical about whether this monster flesh is actually edible. Joran reassures him, pointing out that mandragorani meat is actually a high-end delicacy if cooked correctly. Joran asks Jerry if he would be willing to follow some specific cooking instructions for today. Jerry reluctantly agrees, grumbling with an annoying clicking sound at the end of his sentence. Jerry continues to complain, clicking his tongue in doubt. Joran is already losing his mind, asking him if he can please stop making that annoying clicking sound. Joran guides his hands, instructing him to wrap the rich fat tightly around the sirloin. Jerry clicks his tongue again, grumbling about throwing away precious fat. Joran tells him to tie the roast firmly with string and season it with fresh herbs. He warns Jerry that if he clicks his tongue one more time, he will use his weekly pay to buy deer food. With the roast prepped, Joran places the sirloin onto an iron tray and slides it into the hot stone oven before preparing the vegetable skewers. He shows Jerry how to skewer the seasoned ribs alongside whole onions. Jerry watches closely, asking what temperature they should aim for. Joran suggests they should aim for a perfect medium cook to keep the meat juicy and tender. Jerry inspects the roast, clicking his tongue and wondering if it is actually medium rare. Joran snaps, warning him to stop clicking before he roasts him in a dragon oven. Joran pulls out a jar of rare red sauce imported directly from the capital. Jerry looks at the dark seasoning in disgust, highly doubting that such a bizarre, spicy Eastern sauce will suit Joran's noble tastes. Joran replies that his personal taste doesn't matter. What is important is whether the meal satisfies the hard-working citizens of his territory. He instructs Jerry to pour in a bottle of alcohol to neutralize any gamey odors, and add some boiled antler water to eliminate the foul smell. Peach watches the dark, bubbling sauce in absolute horror, convinced that Joran is practicing some kind of forbidden black magic cooking. Joran completely ignores her panic, commanding Peach to squeeze some fresh fruit juice directly into the simmering marinade. He checks the oven, deciding the roast is perfectly cooked and ready to be taken out to rest. He carves the beautiful, juicy sirloin steak into thick, perfectly cooked slices. He sprinkles some rock salt over a slice, puts it on a fork, and holds it out to Jerry, commanding the stubborn cook to open his mouth and taste it. Jerry hesitantly takes a bite, his eyes instantly widening as the tender, rich juices burst in his mouth. He is completely overwhelmed by the rich flavor, unable to believe that this mind-blowing steak actually came from a monster. Jerry bows deeply, apologizing profusely for his earlier rudeness and arrogance. Joran smiles, telling him to finish up the skewers and get the feast started. The entire camp is soon filled with laughter as the soldiers happily stuff their faces with the incredibly delicious monster meat. Joran walks around with a massive plate of hot skewers, telling the hard-working cooks to go sit down and eat while he handles the remaining work. Lillian, Peach, and Banal sit together, happily clinking their wooden beer mugs and enjoying the incredible feast. Two soldiers sitting nearby sniff the air, completely captivated by the mouth-watering aroma wafting through the camp. Joran smiles proudly to himself, thinking that this amazing dish is so delicious it deserves to be featured on a legendary food show. The hungry soldiers take their first bites and cheer in absolute ecstasy, officially naming the legendary new dish Mandragorani Bulgogi. Later that night, the full moon shines brightly over the peaceful military camp. The soldiers are all fast asleep, completely knocked out and snoring happily after eating their delicious, heavy feast. Lillian walks through the quiet tents, lost in her own thoughts about their mysterious commander. She recalls how Joran suddenly started cooking raw monster meat earlier, a tedious, dirty chore that the former Joran tamer would have never even dreamed of doing. And instead of acting like a stuck-up noble, Joran personally walked around and distributed the delicious skewers to every single person in the caravan. Lillian stares at the sleeping, tamed deers nearby, deeply troubled by his incredible ability to pacify wild beasts, which shouldn't even be possible in this world. But despite her lingering doubts, she clenches her fist and resolves to put her absolute faith in her lord, no matter how much his personality has changed. She walks over to Joran's tent, noticing a bright silhouette inside, and asks if he is still awake. Hearing her voice, Joran pauses his secret sword practice inside the tent. Through the tent canvas, Joran's shadow is seen swinging a sword, but he completely slips and drops the weapon with an awkward thud. Sensing something is wrong, Lillian panics and screams for her lord. Lillian lunges forward, slicing the tent flaps open with her spear, only to find Joran standing there completely fine but highly embarrassed. Joran grumbles at her, clutching his chest and complaining that she scared the absolute daylight out of him. She looks around the tent, sheathes her weapon, and dryly asks if he was busy training in secret. Joran rubs his neck, admitting that is exactly what he was doing. Lillian stares at him, analyzing his clumsy stance and realizing his martial skills have completely deteriorated. She notes that it seems his resurrection after effects have caused him to completely forget his legendary swordsmanship and his ability to manipulate aura. Joran sighs and nods, admitting that her theory is completely correct. Lillian explains that memory loss and skill degradation are actually very common side effects after a resurrection ritual, but she admits there is one major thing she is highly curious about. Joran sweat drops, asking if she only has one question. Lillian sighs, correcting him that it is actually a whole list of questions. She asks how on earth his raw physical strength has suddenly gotten so much more powerful when his actual sword technique is worse than a complete beginner's. Lillian points out that Joran literally grabbed and threw a massive, heavy Mandragorani boss with one hand before slicing it to pieces with raw, uncoordinated force. Joran looks away nervously. It is like the system literally stacked his real-world physical strength on top of his fantasy body. She adds that his mysterious monster-taming spell is a power she has never seen or heard of in any historical record. She continues, pointing out that the former Joran Tamer would have rather died than recruit filthy criminals and wild monsters to build his territory, as it completely violates a knight's honor. Joran asks if she is worried about his honor. Lillian shakes her head, pointing out that empty knightly honor doesn't feed hungry citizens, nor does it protect them from invading monsters. Joran looks at her, deeply impressed by her realistic, pragmatic worldview. He walks over and gently places his hand on her shoulder, calling her name. He tells her that while he knows she is incredibly confused, he's also struggling to make sense of his new reality, and asks her to simply trust him. Lillian looks up, completely touched by his sincere words, and vows to follow her lord wherever he leads. Joran smiles, requesting that she keep his strange skill loss a secret from the rest of the troops. Lillian looks down, apologizing for constantly questioning him and making his stressful situation even more difficult. Determined to be useful, she points to a rack in the corner and tells him to pick up a wooden practice sword. Joran is completely confused, asking why they are using wooden toys. Lillian informs him that she is going to personally retrain him in swordsmanship from the ground up. We cut to a wide shot of the camp, where the two are seen sparring under the moonlit sky. The narration notes the ultimate irony of the situation. In the game's original lore, it was actually Joran Tamer who originally trained Lillian in swordsmanship. Sparring intensely, Lillian smiles and tells him she is simply returning all the lessons he originally gave her. The next day, Joran sits with a massive, throbbing bump on his head, groaning in pain. He admits that Lillian is an absolute monster when it comes to sword practice. Peach fussily applies ice to his swollen head, complaining that she will never forgive Lillian for daring to hit her beloved master. Joran winces, muttering that Peach seems more upset than he is. Joran tells Peach to head back to bed since it is already past midnight, but Peach begs to stay by her master's side a little longer. Joran jokingly tells her she can stay if she wants to help him prep the leftover meat seasoning for tomorrow. Peach looks completely flabbergasted by the unromantic chore. Later, Joran lies down in his bed, stretching his sore muscles and groaning about his aching body. He regrets kicking Peach out, wishing he had asked her to give him a nice shoulder massage instead. But he consoles himself, realizing that sparring with Lillian has actually helped him learn the basic mechanics of controlling his magical aura. Still, he knows his standard sword skills are way too weak. He worries about what will happen if they encounter massive groups of high-level monsters like ogres. He knows his current clumsy swordsmanship is barely enough for self-defense, and is definitely not viable as a main weapon. He opens up the system to analyze his combat options. He rules out standard bows and guns, realizing he needs serious, high-impact firepower to protect his upcoming base. Joran eyes a schematic for a hand cannon, realizing that if he takes a high-damage, long-range roll, he will not have to risk his neck in close-range sword fights. Suddenly, a blue system window flashes, congratulating him on unlocking a rare passive skill called Artillery Nation due to his real-world experience serving in the artillery. Joran is thrilled by the passive skill, which makes aiming cannons incredibly easy, but he sighs, realizing he still lacks the technology and raw materials to actually build a cannon. The system chimes in with a helpful hint, informing him that Tamer territory is rich in various rare minerals, including ancient magic stones. Joran touches his glowing collar pin, realizing he already has one of those rare magic stones on his person. The system adds that he can easily bridge the technology gap by recruiting high-tier dwarf craftsmen or powerful mages. Joran recalls seeing 2 dwarf prisoners back in the royal dungeon, realizing they would be perfect for the job. The system confirms that a crucial branching choice will appear later, allowing him to choose between a powerful mage or a skilled dwarf craftsman. Suddenly, a panicked scout bursts into his tent, screaming that he has urgent, terrifying news. The sweaty scout reports that a massive horde of trolls and gremlins has suddenly invaded 2 of their neighboring villages. Joran looks on in shock as the guard begs for an immediate rescue mission, realizing his peaceful journey has officially come to an end. Under the dark night sky, Joran faces down a massive, muscular green troll. He stands his ground, preparing for a brutal clash. The troll roars furiously and swings its massive stone axe. Knowing that a direct hit from this monster would instantly crack his skull open, Joran prepares to dodge. Joran recalls his intense late-night sparring sessions with Lillian. She taught him that his backdash needs to be a single, short, and explosive motion without bringing both feet together. Using her expert advice, Joran executes a perfect, light backdash, easily sliding out of the path of the troll's devastating axe swing. He immediately pivots and swings his sword, aiming a powerful, diagonal, aura-infused slash directly at the monster's neck. He manages to land a hit, drawing green blood, but Joran realized fighting a troll is completely different from fighting weak Mandragorani. The cut Joran made is shallow because his focus wavered, causing the magical aura around his blade to instantly vanish. He realizes his concentration is still too unstable. The angry troll continues its relentless assault, swinging its heavy weapon and roaring in fury. Joran is shocked to see the shallow cut on the troll's neck heal right in front of his eyes, leaving him to marvel at their insane, cheat-like regeneration speed. Knowing he cannot win a battle of attrition, Joran decides to change his strategy. He plans to make quick, compact swings to take full advantage of their massive height and reach difference. He ducks beneath another wild swing, moving with incredible agility and positioning himself for a rapid counterattack. The troll relies heavily on its healing factor, preparing to take a direct hit if it means landing a counterattack on Joran. Joran notices the monster's reckless, aggressive stance and decides to exploit its overconfidence. He slides close to the troll's legs, dodging a heavy smash, and slashes the monster's exposed side. The sharp blade bites deep into the troll's waist, causing the beast to let out an agonized roar as green blood splatters across the ground. Joran quickly backsteps, keeping his distance and preparing to check on the rest of his squad. With the local threat neutralized, Joran rushes through the village, frantically calling out to his injured soldier, Yak. He finds Yak collapsed on the cobblestone floor, groaning in pain, and immediately kneels down to inspect his wounds. Yak weakly tells him he is fine, but Joran can see the soldier was brutally hit by a troll's stone axe earlier. Joran thinks about using the dead troll's blood as a makeshift healing potion, hoping its legendary regeneration properties might save his soldier. But a blue system warning window pops up, advising him that troll blood is highly toxic to humanoids. The system explains that troll blood must undergo a complex purification process with Dodoom tree sap first, and consuming raw blood will only cause severe fever and vomiting. Seeing his lord look worried, Yak begins giving a textbook, classic anime death flag speech. He weakly mutters that his injury is nothing, and that he promised to revive his hometown, bring his parents here, and propose to his childhood friend. The kid is literally stacking every single tragic flag in the book, looking completely at peace with his impending doom. Joran absolutely snaps, smacking him lightly and telling him to shut his mouth and stop raising obvious death flags. He tells him that if he dies, he will personally resurrect him just to scold him. Suddenly, Joran hears familiar rustling sounds and looks up, wondering why on earth his support squads haven't arrived yet. Right on cue, his 3 tamed Mandragorani deers finally catch up with the caravan, letting out happy, squeaky noises. The deers apologize, panting heavily and explaining that Joran's warhorse was simply moving too fast for them to keep up. Relieved to see them, Joran commands Number 8 to carry the injured Yak back to the safety of the barracks immediately. He orders Number 13 to search the surrounding village for any more trolls, while commanding Number 9 to follow him as backup. Suddenly, Joran hears a distant, terrified scream from one of his soldiers, Leo, who is being pursued by another massive troll. Lillian shouts that the distance is too far for Number 9 to execute a body slam in time to save Leo. Realizing he has no other choice, Joran decides to spend 5 of his precious points to instantly force tame the attacking monster. He activates his main skill, spending the points to trigger an immediate, high-priority pacification. The magical spell wraps around the troll, freezing it mid-swing. The monster blinks in confusion, completely lost. The troll drops its club, holding its head and muttering in confusion, completely unable to process why its bloodlust has suddenly vanished. The newly tamed troll turns around, staring at Joran and demanding to know what kind of human magic was just used on him. Joran pulls up its stats, revealing the troll has incredibly high combat stats, making him a perfect frontline tank for the squad. Joran shouts at Leo, telling him to quickly get away from the monster. He commands Leo to regroup with the archers within firing range, promising that he will personally handle the situation from here. The confused troll continues to mutter, still trying to grasp his sudden change of heart. He looks back at Joran, completely submissive but utterly bewildered by his new loyalty. Suddenly, another wild troll enters the area, roaring as it spots its companion acting strangely. Joran quickly compares the two monsters' stats, noticing that his tamed troll has significantly higher combat power than the new wild intruder. A smirk crosses Joran's face as he realizes he has a massive tactical advantage. He points his finger at the wild intruder, loudly commanding his newly tamed troll to beat that guy up. The pacified troll obeys immediately, charging forward and tackling his former companion. The two massive monsters crash into each other, exchanging brutal, heavy blows. His tamed troll lands a heavy strike, but the wild intruder fights back, roaring in absolute rage at the betrayal. The two titans wrestle on the ground, tearing up the grass as they trade violent hits. The wild troll swings wildly, completely desperate to overpower its brainwashed ally. Joran watches the brutal struggle, thinking about the old saying that the best way to catch a con artist is with another con artist. He's definitely taking notes on this strategy. His tamed troll manages to completely overpower the intruder, pinning him to the ground and dealing the final, decisive blow. The wild troll groans in defeat, staring up at his buddy in utter disbelief, completely broken. He weakly mutters about how cunning and cruel humans are, before completely collapsing. Joran looks down at the defeated monster. He feels a little bit bad for using and killing him, but knows he has no other choice. He draws his sword, getting ready to put the wild beast out of its misery. A system pop-up warns him to be extremely careful, explaining that trolls can survive and regenerate even if their upper and lower bodies are completely severed. He raises his sword high, making sure he aims a clean, diagonal slash to ensure the severed parts cannot fuse back together. With a single, powerful swing, Joran cleanly cleaves the monster's neck, ensuring its regeneration factor is completely neutralized. Joran wipes his blade, thinking that while the troll's physical combat power is incredible, they are way too violent and unstable to control easily. He wonders if their instability is due to his pacification skill level being too low, but shrugs it off, happy that he managed to save Leo and recruit a massive tank. His new troll, whom Joran names Garani, sits on the ground looking completely sad and submissive, begging Joran not to kill him and promising to be a good boy. Joran smiles and comforts his giant new pet, telling him that as long as he listens well, nothing bad will happen to him. Looking at the other dead troll, Joran suddenly feels a twinge of regret, wishing he had kept that one alive as well to double his frontline strength. But his thoughts are instantly cut short as two massive new trolls step out of the shadows, roaring in unison as they spot Joran. Joran curses his luck, wondering why these antisocial monsters are suddenly appearing as a coordinated duo. He tries to quickly pacify one of them, but a blue system notification blocks him, announcing that his pacification skill is currently on a 1-minute cooldown. The system adds that the cooldown duration is proportional to the target's raw strength and taming difficulty. Joran screams internally, cursing the system for not warning him earlier. With the two trolls charging directly at him, Joran quickly barks an order to number 9, telling the deer to let out its loudest screech the moment the monsters reach them. The two massive trolls crash into their defensive perimeter with a deafening boom, starting another chaotic clash. While surveying the chaotic village, Joran suddenly notices a massive explosion rocking a nearby building. He watches as a troll is blasted backward, completely engulfed in a violent, fiery burst of smoke. Joran is completely stunned, staring at the raw destruction and wondering if they have a powerful mage hiding in the village who uses explosion magic. He notes that his intelligence reports never mentioned a high-level magic user living in this small settlement, and wonders if the attack came from the high ground. Suddenly, a gruff, deep voice from behind asks Joran what exactly he is looking around for. Joran spins around and is completely shocked to find a stout, orange-bearded dwarf standing right behind him. The dazed troll stands back up, groaning in pain, its massive healing factor already trying to mend the explosion damage. Joran realizes he has to move fast to sever its head. As Joran prepares to strike, the dwarf casually steps forward, calling Joran skinny and telling him not to butt into his business. The bold dwarf stands tall, completely unbothered by the giant monster looming over him. He reaches into his bag and pulls out a strange, heavy black stone, looking ready to throw it. Joran watches him, deeply confused and wondering what on earth a regular rock is going to do against a giant, regenerating troll. The dwarf chuckles, explaining with a grin that he hammered a special magical nail deep inside the stone. He adds that to detonate it, he just needs to drive the nail all the way through the rock. With a satisfying click, the dwarf firmly hammers the trigger mechanism into the explosive stone. With a powerful heave, he hurls the makeshift grenade directly at the approaching troll. The stone explodes on contact, unleashing a colossal, blinding blast of fire and shrapnel that completely consumes the monster. The explosion is so powerful that the troll's entire upper torso is vaporized instantly, leaving nothing but a pair of legs standing on the smoking ground. Joran is absolutely speechless. He realizes that the dwarf's throwing method and weapon are literally identical to a modern combat grenade. Joran praises his incredible weapon, admitting that the explosive power is far more devastating than standard mage magic. The proud dwarf introduces himself as Bernabal Runton, happy to meet someone who appreciates his craft. The system window pops up, revealing Runton is a legendary 4-star dwarf craftsman who dedicated his entire life to researching explosions. A system pop-up warns him that this dwarf hates working under others, but currently views Joran favorably. Joran immediately draws his sword, startling the dwarf. Runton panics, demanding to know why Joran is suddenly drawing a blade on him, but Joran yells at him to stay completely still. Joran leaps forward, vaulting right over the startled dwarf. Another wild troll had snuck up directly behind Runton, preparing to smash the dwarf's skull. Joran swings his sword, parrying the troll's heavy weapon and saving Runton's life in the nick of time. With a powerful horizontal swing, Joran delivers a clean diagonal slash across the monster's chest. The heavy strike completely cleaves the monster, sending green blood spraying across the snow. The troll weakly groans as it falls, and Joran sighs, muttering about how annoyingly persistent these monsters are. He wipes his sword, completely calm after the sudden ambush. He sheathes his weapon, letting out a heavy sigh of relief as the battle finally settles. Runton looks at Joran, deeply touched, and notices Joran's hands are covered in soot and dirt from the rescue. The dwarf reaches out, apologizing for getting Joran's clean, noble gloves dirty. Joran looks at him, completely unbothered by a little dirt. Suddenly, Runton grabs Joran's hand and bursts into hysterical, comical tears. He weeps that his own heart is the only dirty thing here for doubting a noble who risked his life to save him. With the battle over, we see a young villager kid crying bitterly amidst the smoking ruins of his home. Terrified villagers weep over the bodies of their loved ones, begging them to wake up. Lillian sighs, noting that they are about to face another classic, messy post-battle scene. Joran looks confused, asking her what she means. Lillian exhales a puff of smoke, staying silent as they walk toward the crying crowd. Desperate villagers crowd around Rubia, begging the high priestess to use her divine magic to save their deceased family members. Rubia looks down at them with a cold, dead-eyed expression, flatly telling them to gather all the bodies and severed limbs in one place first. The villagers are completely outraged by her cold attitude, angrily demanding if priests in this kingdom simply neglect the dead. Joran quickly steps in to diffuse the tension, explaining that a resurrection spell consumes an immense amount of divine power, and Rubia cannot possibly save everyone alone. He reassures them that he has already sent a swift courier to summon the paladins, promising they will arrive by noon to resurrect every single victim. The system note explains that when paladins gather and pray together, they can perform mass resurrections, unlike single priests. Joran commands the villagers to pray for the deceased, promising that his soldiers will guard the town and protect them until help arrives. Banal steps up and scolds the ungrateful villagers, pointing out that instead of complaining, they should be thanking the soldiers who fought all night to save their lives. The villagers look down in deep shame, realizing the halfling is completely right. The crowd bows, tearfully thanking Joran and his brave soldiers for saving their village from total destruction. Joran's passive skill, inspiration, levels up from 6 to 7 due to his incredible leadership and diplomacy. Later that night, Runton enters Joran's tent, casually addressing him by his full name, Joran Tamer. Peach instantly flares up in rage, screaming at the dwarf for daring to address her noble master so carelessly. Peach proudly introduces herself as the royal handmaiden of Joran Tamer, defending his honor. Runton scoffs, calling her a mere housemaid and rolling his eyes. Peach looks ready to murder him on the spot. Joran quickly intervenes, commanding Peach to go fetch some beer, tobacco, and snacks to defuse the looming fight. Runton waves his hand, dryly stating that he doesn't smoke. Joran is surprised, wondering how a dwarf can possibly refuse tobacco. Runton explains that getting soaked in the strong smell of tobacco makes his nose completely insensitive to the subtle smell of gunpowder, which is crucial for his work. Joran nods in respect, and commands Peach to bring Runton some dark beer instead. Peach reluctantly obeys her master's request. Joran apologizes for Peach's rudeness and invites Runton to simply call him Joran. Runton smiles, admitting that Joran has great potential. He notes that most humans who suddenly rise to positions of immense power become arrogant and hollow, like they have been struck by lightning. Runton dismisses the common belief that the position makes the person. He firmly states that if a person changes simply because they put on a new hat, it means they were never much of a person to begin with. He laughs, adjusting his goggles and joking that he would only understand such a sudden change if the hat was a legendary Tessernite helmet. Joran smiles, agreeing with his philosophy, and gently asks Runton if he has finally made a decision regarding his proposal to join Tamer territory. Runton hums thoughtfully, seriously considering the offer. Runton, stroking his orange beard, admits he's been thinking deeply about Joran's proposal to join him. Joran waits silently, hoping to hear some good news. Runton speaks honestly, admitting he has taken a genuine liking to Joran, especially since he saved his life and offered a fascinating plan to construct powerful cannons and firearms. The dwarf admits that if it were completely up to him, he would happily pack his bags and follow Joran to Tamer territory. Joran asks if there is some hidden issue holding him back, wondering if he's afraid of the monster threat. Runton scoffingly tells him to get real. He explains that as a dwarf obsessed with explosions, he doesn't worry about whether a place has monsters. In fact, he worries that a place might not have enough monsters to blow up. Joran bursts into laughter, thoroughly enjoying the dwarf's bold attitude, and asks him why he is still hesitating if he isn't afraid of the danger. Runton sighs, explaining that the core of the issue is his fierce, independent nature. He flatly admits that he absolutely cannot stand working beneath anyone. He explains that if he joins Joran as a standard vassal under a noble, he would be forced to spend his days bowing and swearing loyalty, which goes completely against his stubborn dwarf pride. Joran reassures him, letting him know he has no intention of turning him into a servant. Runton looks surprised and sweating, asking if Joran is proposing a temporary mercenary contract instead. Joran shakes his head, revealing he wants to bring Runton into his house as an official advisor. He explains that Runton's role would be a high-ranking weapons advisor specializing in cannon and shell production, meaning he would be acting more like a mentor rather than a servant. Runton stares at him with wide, disbelieving eyes, asking if Joran is actually serious about treating a rogue dwarf as a highly respected mentor. Joran smiles warmly, pointing out that treating a brilliant engineer like a common grunt would be an absolute waste of rare talent. Runton's eyes widen as the word engineer echoes in his mind, deeply touched by the immense respect. A tragic flashback shows his former townspeople pointing fingers and mocking him as a dangerous lunatic obsessed with explosions who would eventually blow up their entire mine. The heavy silence is broken as Peach cheerfully enters the tent, bringing in a massive tray filled with cold beers and hot snacks. Runton's eyes light up as he grabs a massive mug of dark beer, praising its rich galleon flavor. He is absolutely thrilled by the luxury treatment. Joran watches him happily stuff his face, realizing this dwarf is incredibly easy to please as long as you feed him well, comparing him to a friendly warehouse captain from his past life. Runton gnaws on a drumstick, admitting that he will accept the advisor position under one simple, non-negotiable condition. Joran asks what it is. Runton simply requests that Joran promise to keep serving him this incredible food and top-tier beer every single day. As Joran agrees, a blue system notification flashes, announcing that his passive skill Inspire has officially reached level 8. Joran warmly shakes the dwarf's hand, officially welcoming Bernabal Runton as his new chief weapons advisor. The next morning, a group of holy knights on white horses rides into their camp. A handsome, elite knight in white armor dismounts, addressing Joran respectfully as a fellow noble. A system stats window floats over the knight's head, revealing his name is Demis Ezev. He is a legendary 5-star Dragon Blade rank knight with excessive loyalty. Looking at his stats, Joran is completely blown away. Demis possesses incredible physical strength, leadership, and willpower. Joran's sweat drops, realizing this guy's combat power is completely off the charts. Demis sighs, expressing his disappointment that their scouts failed to detect the monster movement sooner. A helpful system note explains that in this continent, Dragon Blade rank knights are so powerful they can literally fight giant dragons single-handedly. Joran thinks to himself that trying to recruit this legendary knight to Tamer territory would be a waste of time, since his loyalty to the crown is sitting at a maximum. Joran tries to play it off smoothly, admitting he is also highly disappointed that they couldn't prevent the tragedy sooner. Demis looks at Joran, pointing out that a noble capable of organizing defense forces this quickly shouldn't be wasting his time in a rundown border post, suggesting he take on greater duties for the kingdom. Joran replies that they will handle the cleanup of the village, and politely tells Demis to leave the rest of the aftermath to the Holy Knights. But Demis stops him, revealing he also came carrying a royal scroll, and announces that His Majesty has granted Joran a sudden promotion and rewards. Joran's eyes widen in shock as a vision of the queen holding a royal decree flashes in his mind. Demis hands over the golden scroll, stating that the king is thoroughly pleased with Joran's repeated military achievements on the frontier. Joran kneels, officially accepting the royal decree as the border count of his new territory. The scroll text praises him for fortifying the borderlands, and awards him a massive sum of 2,000 gold to distribute among his troops. Demis notices Joran's hands trembling and asks if he is disappointed by the reward. Joran quickly stammers out a polite denial, gripping the heavy sack of gold coins tightly as his hands shake from sheer excitement. Watching Demis ride away, Joran complains to himself about the knight's constant disappointment, realizing the queen simply wants him tucked away on the frontier to act as a human shield. A narration box explains that the local villagers, deeply moved by Joran's heroic achievements, begged to follow him to his territory. Joran looks at the young kids in the crowd, politely rejecting them and pointing out that they are far too young for such a dangerous border life. He sighs, wishing he could have recruited at least one powerful mage to complete his squad, but assumes there are none left in this remote village. Suddenly, a soft, timid voice from behind calls out to him, addressing him as the border count. Joran turns his horse around, wondering who could possibly be calling him. He is greeted by a cute, green-haired girl holding a wooden staff, who tearfully thanks him for saving her life during the troll raid yesterday. A system stats window floats over her, revealing her name is Mayral. She is a 3-star weather mage, though her personality is noted as extremely timid. A blue notification flashes, informing Joran of a major character encounter. It warns him that since his current army lacks a magic user, recruiting Mayral would be crucial for his base defense. Joran is absolutely thrilled, realizing his strategic choice to defend this village has paid off with the perfect recruit. Mayral looks down nervously, begging Joran to accept even a worthless, low-level mage like herself into his ranks. Without wasting a single second, Joran lunges forward and firmly grabs her hand, not letting this rare opportunity slip away. With a bright, charming smile, Joran welcomes Mayral to tamer territory. The caravan finally sets out, and after a long, grueling journey, the narration box announces their arrival at tamer territory. We get an aerial view of Joran and his caravan riding into a completely rundown, ruined, and smoky medieval village. It looks like a war zone. The ground is covered in thick mud, garbage is piled high in the corners, and flies and worms are crawling all over the floor. This place is an absolute dump. Joran stares blankly at the desolate, ruined wasteland of his new fief, completely speechless. He clenches his cloak, his face twisting in horror as he realizes the state of his new territory is actually way worse than he ever could have imagined. He looks around the muddy, ruined streets, completely exhausted and utterly defeated, wondering how on earth he is supposed to rebuild this dump. Suddenly, a massive blue system window flashes, announcing that Chapter 1 of the campaign has officially begun and commands the Guardian to prepare for his first defense. Joran's face breaks into a confident, determined grin. As an expert gamer, he knows exactly how defense games work and boldly asks the system when the first wave is going to start. Joran looks at the system window in absolute horror, watching a countdown timer rapidly ticking away from 8. He panics, realizing the preparation time unit was seconds, not days. He groans in frustration, cursing the deceptive system that promised him plenty of time to prepare for the invasion. The system explains that because he spent so much time helping the neighboring villages, his preparation period for the first defense stage has been dramatically reduced. A blue prompt officially unlocks Stage 1 of the defense, outlining their primary defense mission. The screen displays crucial gameplay tips, warning Joran that if any monsters bypass his forces and reach the district office, his points and reputation will tank. A tactical layout of the terrain appears, showing that the vulnerable district office is located quite a far distance from their current position. Joran marches quickly with his squad, knowing they have to establish a defensive perimeter before the monsters arrive. A red system warning flashes, informing him that the Goblin Vanguard has already departed and will reach the district office in approximately 2 hours. He immediately commands his scout deer, number 8, to dash ahead and gather intelligence on the exact goblin numbers and gear. Joran addresses his anxious troops and the local villagers, loudly announcing that a massive goblin unit is heading directly toward their east district. The villagers instantly begin whispering, assuming their newly appointed noble has completely lost his mind and is simply talking in his sleep. Their local finance officer steps forward, looking deeply skeptical and questioning how Joran could possibly know about a sudden, organized monster invasion. The system pulls up the officer's stats, revealing his name is Dunor Rayon, a 1-star character who is completely incapable of comprehending the tactical situation. Joran looks at the annoying clerk, explaining that while it is hard to understand, he possesses a unique, divine foresight ability. Tired of the man's constant doubting, Joran offers him a bet. He promises to hand over his entire fortune if the goblins don't show up, but demands that Dunor stop making doubting noises if he is proven right. He turns to the rest of the crowd, reassuring the civilians that they will not be conscripted, and promises his own elite troops will handle the entire goblin subjugation. Lillian watches Joran walk away, asking him if he is truly comfortable making a crazy bet to give away his entire fortune. Joran chuckles, admitting he doesn't have any property to lose anyway. He asks Lillian if she also doubts his monster warning. Lillian replies that since he has shown actual divine magic, she has no reason to doubt his predictions. Joran grins, thinking to himself how incredibly useful his knowledge of the game's mechanics has been for navigating this fantasy world. But he knows he has to keep his metagaming secrets hidden from the locals, as they would find the concept of a game world completely insane. Lillian steps up, telling him he doesn't need to explain his secrets. She looks at him with complete devotion, telling him that her loyalty is absolute simply because she believes in him as her lord. Joran looks at her, deeply moved by her unwavering trust. Suddenly, his scout deer number 8 dashes back into the camp, letting out excited squeaks to report on its reconnaissance. The deer explains that it tried to get close to the goblin horde, but was completely blocked by a massive, ominous black fog that blanketed the area. Joran is intrigued. He asks the system if there is a way to directly share his tamed beast's vision to see what it saw. He realizes that if they can communicate through pacification, sharing visual memories should be entirely possible. Right on cue, the system chimes in, announcing he has successfully unlocked a new passive skill called Communion, allowing him to read and exchange memories with his monsters. Joran grins, glad the system is finally starting to hand over some incredibly useful skills. The system details reveal that this powerful skill was originally locked until his pacification reached level 5, but was awarded early as a reward for his clever tactical play. Joran places his hand on number 8's forehead, instructing the deer to close its eyes and recall the black fog. The deer closes its eyes, and the magical link instantly activates. A sudden, violent rush of sensory information floods Joran's mind, causing him to gasp in surprise. The system displays a magical map, revealing the black fog is a literal fog of war that obscures the unexplored parts of the territory. The text box explains that clearing stages is the only way to lift the fog and reveal the layout of the surrounding lands. Through the magical link, Joran can literally smell the foul, toxic odor of the fog, realizing the game's sensory feedback has become terrifyingly realistic. He gently rubs the deer's neck, processing the valuable layout data. Looking at the map, Joran realizes this fog acts as an anti-spawn kill measure, preventing players from setting up traps directly at the monster spawn points. With a confident smile, Joran commands his entire army to move out at a steady trot, determined to secure a perfect victory in their first stage. The heavy wooden wheels of their supply carriages begin to roll, kicking up dust as the caravan departs. His soldiers march in perfect, disciplined rows, raising their spears high. The caravan moves through the outskirts, but suddenly, the heavy carriages grind to a screeching halt. One of the main axles of their heavy wooden carriages has completely snapped under the weight. Joran rides over in frustration, demanding to know why the carriage has suddenly broken down. He scolds the porters, reminding them that he explicitly ordered them to distribute the weight evenly to prevent this exact disaster. The flustered porters grumble, realizing the axle is completely ruined, and struggle to lift the heavy carriage frame to fix it. Joran and the porters strain their muscles, desperately trying to hoist the heavy wooden cart. Watching them struggle from a distance, Runton scoffs, rolling his eyes at how incredibly clumsy and weak the humans are. The dwarf screams at them in absolute hilarious rage, yelling that even a shaky skeleton could lift the cart faster than them. The proud dwarf looks completely annoyed by their sheer incompetence. He stomps over, calling Joran a frustrating pup and demanding to know why he is struggling all by himself when he has a legendary dwarf craftsman on his payroll. Joran jokingly replies that he didn't want to bother his chief advisor with menial labor. With a single, effortless grunt, Runton leverages the carriage and snaps the replacement axle into place, leaving Joran and the kids completely awestruck. The heavy wooden wheel spins smoothly once again, perfectly repaired. Runton wipes his brow, asking if they are planning to use these heavy carriages as a defensive barricade. Joran nods in agreement. The dwarf suggests that if they want to build a sturdy barricade, they should remove the front wheel of the cart first. He explains that he specifically designed his axles to be easily detached, meaning they can quickly pop the wheel off and use it as a massive, heavy shield. Joran grins, realizing this essentially turns his cargo transport into a mobile battle wagon, making it a brilliant piece of weapons engineering. A tactical screen displays the battlefield, showing his forces split into two distinct defense groups. Joran analyzes the terrain, knowing that while a split defense is risky, defending right in front of the objective is their only hope of survival. He notes that a massive, rocky hill separates the two goblin spawn locations, making it the perfect strategic high ground for his ranged dealers to rain down attacks. As they approach the hill, Joran prepares to test a theory, assuming some kind of hidden system effect is at play. A system tip confirms his suspicions, explaining that goblins are not forest-type monsters, meaning they will struggle immensely to climb the steep, rocky hill. Meryl walks up to him timidly, clutching her staff and nervously asking if a low-level weather mage like herself can actually help in a battle against hundreds of goblins. Joran smiles warmly, telling her not to be afraid because his infantry will block any enemies that try to target her, and instructs her to focus entirely on her magic. He notes that the wide-open plains are perfect for her weather spells. Mayra looks up in sudden realization, remembering the system tip. If the goblins struggle in forests and hills, this rocky terrain is their ultimate choke point. Joran points his sword toward the steep cliff, commanding his trusty deer, number 8, to scale the rocky slope. The deer squeaks in agreement, ready to climb. Meryl gasps in shock as number 8's hooves clatter against the steep rock, effortlessly scaling the cliffside to secure the ultimate strategic high ground. As they scale the steep, rocky hill, the tamed deer, number 8, proudly thinks to itself that its hooves are perfectly built for running over mountains and through dense forests. Joran patently dismisses its pride, telling the deer he already knows exactly what its feet look like and to focus on the climb. Once they reach the summit, Joran realizes the high ground is an absolute tactical goldmine. He yells down to his squad, ordering the archers and Banal to mount the other Mandragorani deers and join him on the hill. Banal and Runton look completely furious and sweat drop, screaming at Joran. They ask if he has completely lost his mind to suggest they ride wild monsters and throw rocks like common savages. With the clock ticking down, Joran realizes he has no time to argue. He groans in frustration, deciding to spend more of his precious points to force pacify the deers so they will cooperate. A bright system warning flashes on his screen, announcing that the first wave is about to begin in exactly 10 seconds. The system tutorial explains that a wave refers to a phase where large numbers of monsters swarm the area, and Stage 1 will consist of 10 waves. Right on cue, a massive, terrifying horde of gray, red-eyed goblins bursts out of the tree line, charging toward their position. Joran commands his archers to load their bows, instructing them to ignore the front runners and target the dense ranks marching right behind the vanguard. The goblins tilt their heads in confusion, completely oblivious to the trap waiting for them on the hill. From the high ground, Joran bellows a loud, commanding order to fire. A volley of sharp arrows rains down from the sky, slicing through the air like a lethal storm. The arrows pierce the goblin vanguard, causing instant panic as several monsters collapse in agony. The panicked survivors try to push their way forward, screaming at each other to get out of the way as the formation crumbles. Goblins trip and tumble over one another, completely disoriented by the unexpected ranged onslaught. Joran spots a group of stubborn goblins trying to force their way up the rocky slope and yells at Banal to focus his attacks on those frontrunners. Banal smiles confidently from the back of his deer, assuring his lord that he has everything completely under control. The halfling begins hurling heavy stones down the cliffside with incredible force. Banal winds up his arm, throwing rocks comically fast like a high-speed pitching machine. The heavy stones smash into the climbing goblins, instantly knocking them off the rocky slope. With the initial charge repelled, Joran commands his spearmen to take up their positions at the narrow pass at the base of the hill. The armored spearmen lock their shields and point their weapons forward, creating an impenetrable barricade. The remaining goblins struggle to climb over the steep rocks, completely bottlenecked by the terrain. The spearmen thrust their weapons forward, easily skewering the climbing monsters one by one. The goblin forces are completely decimated at the choke point, falling backward onto the bloody dirt. Seeing the enemy advance halt, Joran commands his archers to temporarily cease fire to conserve their arrows. Banal asks if he should stop throwing rocks too, but Joran tells him to keep hurling them, pointing out they have an endless supply of stone ammunition right on this hill. Joran calls out to one of his support deers, Unit 16, ordering it to run back down, grab another sack of heavy stones, and return to the summit immediately. Down below, the frantic goblins yell at each other to step on their fallen comrades and climb up the steep hill. Joran grins, declaring that they will not retreat, and commands his deer, Unit 8, to charge down the slope to join the melee. Lillian rides up beside him, teasing him that he seems to have forgotten his formal mounted training. Joran laughs it off, claiming that fighting on a deer still counts as mounted swordsmanship. With a fierce battle cry, Joran swings his sword and slices through the nearest goblin ranks. Lillian smiles, noting that his aura control is surprisingly proficient, even if it isn't quite as legendary as it was before his resurrection. Joran commands his deer to charge toward the opposite side of the battlefield to cut off another flank. Number 8 dashes across the field with incredible speed, trampling several monsters under its hooves. The terrified goblins scream in absolute panic, unable to comprehend why a crazy human is riding a giant forest deer like a warhorse. A sneaky goblin tries to slip past their lines, creeping through the dirt to flank their positions. But as the goblin peeks around a wooden carriage, it freezes in absolute terror. Joran's sword flashes through the dark, cleanly cutting the sneaky monster down with a single, lightning-fast strike. Suddenly, a massive, muscular gray foot steps over the dead goblin, shaking the dirt. Joran sweat drops, staring in shock at the colossal shadow looming over the battlefield. A red system warning flashes, announcing that a formidable mid-boss, the Goblin Poison Squad leader, has officially joined the battle. Joran's jaw drops in absolute shock. He screams at the system, demanding to know why on earth a mid-boss from a later stage is appearing in their very first wave. He pulls up the giant's stats, confirming it has incredibly high physical power and dangerous poison attributes. The system chimes in with an explanation, letting Joran know the game's difficulty has been automatically scaled up because his early tactical performance was too good. Joran is completely outraged, pointing out that if he is performing brilliantly, the system should be giving him extra rewards instead of punishing him with a harder boss. The system calmly replies that the quest he entered operates under a variable difficulty mechanic. It explains that under this system, as the stage difficulty increases, the ultimate rewards will also scale up, but warns that the opposite is also true. Joran growls in frustration, grumbling that the system should have told him about this crazy difficulty scaling rule in advance. The system dryly replies that based on an analysis of his memory and personality, even if it had told him, he probably would have forgotten most of it anyway. Joran's eye twitches in absolute irritation as he asks the system if it is subtly mocking his intelligence. The system dismisses his anger, promising to continue providing highly useful information at appropriate times. Joran eyes the massive mid-boss, wondering if he can pacify him if he defeats him in a duel, but decides it is way too risky to fight him head-on. The poison squad leader stands menacingly, flanked by several smaller goblin guards. Joran commands his archers to focus all their firepower on the giant mid-boss. A massive volley of arrows rains down, targeting the towering monster. But the giant easily raises his heavy iron arm guards, parrying all the sharp arrows with loud metallic clangs. Joran is stunned by the boss's incredible reflexes, and quickly shouts at Banal to throw a stone directly at the giant's head. Banal lines up his arm and hurls a massive rock with perfect accuracy, but the giant mid-boss easily catches the rock out of the air, completely unfazed. Banal sweat drops, apologizing to his lord for the embarrassing miss. Joran looks down, trying to come up with a new strategy to bypass the boss's defense. Banal hurls another heavy stone, determined to break through. But the giant easily parries the rock again, letting out a mocking grunt. Joran tells Banal it is fine and to keep throwing, pointing out that even if they cannot deal direct damage, they just need to slow the giant's legs down. He commands his deer Unit 16 to dash back down the hill and bring Mayral up immediately, realizing they have to use her weather magic early to turn the tide. The deer squeaks in agreement, quickly turning around and bounding down the slope. The deer slides to a halt in front of Mayral, and she looks up at the towering hill in shock, asking if Joran is truly planning to have her cast her magic from the summit. She stares at the battlefield with wide, nervous eyes, completely terrified but trying her absolute best to summon her courage. Mayral climbs up to the summit of the rocky hill, looking completely nervous and timidly asking Joran if he called for her. Joran nods, pointing down at the massive, fanged goblin mid-boss and commanding Mayral to summon a powerful gust of wind directly toward the giant. Mayral nervously raises her wooden staff, squeezing her eyes shut, and attempts to channel her magical energy with a desperate yell. But instead of a powerful gale, a pathetic, tiny puff of wind emerges. Mayral instantly bursts into tears, sobbing and apologizing for being completely useless. She slumps her shoulders in deep disappointment, muttering that she truly is nothing but a hindrance to the team. The system displays a game mechanic note, explaining that to prevent extreme luck from breaking the balance, each magic stat has a fixed maximum and minimum cap. The screen shows Chibi Mayral looking completely sad and helpless as she tries to comprehend her low dice rolls. She sniffs, trying her best to hold back her tears but feels utterly miserable about her failed spellcasting. Joran walks over and smiles warmly. He explains to her that drawing out magic power is heavily dependent on a mage's inner confidence, rather than just raw random luck. He looks at her gently, admitting that it is completely natural to feel terrified when surrounded by swarming, bloodthirsty monsters. Joran tells her to relax and take the pressure off herself, reassuring her that he isn't asking her to summon a massive, destructive typhoon. He looks down at the approach of the giant goblin mid-boss, pointing out that she doesn't need a wide area of effect. Joran builds her confidence, telling Mayral that she is actually the #1 weather mage in their entire territory. Mayral tearfully replies that she is literally the only weather mage in the territory. With a smug smile, Joran replies that being the only one simply makes her completely unique and irreplaceable. Mayral's eyes widen, deeply touched by his words. Gaining a sudden burst of confidence, Mayral grips her staff tightly and resolves to try her absolute best one more time. She channels her mana with full concentration, and a massive, swirling vortex of magical wind begins to gather around the tip of her wooden staff. A colossal gale sweeps across the battlefield. Banal is nearly blown off his deer, crying out in shock at the sudden, powerful windstorm. The violent storm kicks up dirt and leaves, creating a massive, blinding dust cloud. The powerful gale hits the goblins directly, completely blinding them and disrupting their advancement. Runton grins, thoroughly enjoying the chaos, and mutters that all of his hard work building weapons is finally about to pay off. Seeing the enemy completely disoriented, Joran touches his blue-collar pin, ready to unleash his secret tactical weapon. He flashes an evil, confident smile, declaring that it is finally time to show these goblins the terrifying power of modern artillery. Runton drops a massive, heavy iron mortar onto the dirt, its metallic barrel pointing directly toward the blinded enemy ranks. Joran proudly introduces the weapon as a mortar. Mayral blinks in confusion, having never heard of such a strange device. Joran pulls out a glowing, heart-shaped stone, explaining that it is a primal magic stone, which is infinitely stronger and more versatile than a standard magic staff. He hugs the iron mortar, explaining that he received this precious primal stone as a reward during his royal promotion ceremony. The system details explain that, unlike regular magic stones, the elemental attribute of a primal magic stone can be customized by the owner to boost specific spells. Joran smiles, commanding the system interface to configure the stone exactly as he had planned. The screen flashes a blue prompt, confirming that the primal magic stone's attribute has been successfully set to explosive propulsion. The stone glows with an intense blue light. Joran laughs in excitement, praising Runton for his incredible engineering work. Runton grins proudly, pointing out that the magic stone isn't the only thing he designed to fit perfectly. With a loud heave-ho, Joran lifts a massive, perfectly round stone shell, completely amazed by the dwarf's flawless craftsmanship. He places the heavy stone shell right into the barrel of the mortar. Runton chuckles, bragging that he spent hours carving the stone into a perfect sphere just like Joran ordered. Joran aims the massive weapon directly at the blinded goblin mid-boss, his eyes glowing with excitement as his passive skill Artillery Nation activates. He is fully ready to blow the enemy to pieces. With the mortar fully loaded, a blue system window pops up, asking Joran if he would like to register a custom name for his prototype weapon. Joran ponders for a moment before deciding to casually name his new device, the Impact Cannon, for the time being. The system registers the name, and Joran stands beside his newly christened cannon, ready to run a field test. The interface informs him that the primal magic stone is fully charged, and he is free to output its mana to fire. A blue confirmation box reveals that Joran's designated launch keyword is a simple, loud order to fire. Joran accesses the system, deciding to adjust the mana stone's power level down from its maximum capacity to a more controlled level so they don't accidentally blow up the entire mountain. A trajectory graphic appears on his screen, displaying the simulated ranges and paths for power settings at 25, 50, 75, and 100. The system notes explain that his targeting precision will scale up automatically as his Nation of Cannon's passive skill levels up. Joran locks his gaze onto the fanged goblin mid-boss, deciding to start with a highly conservative power setting of 15 before yelling the launch command. The heart-shaped primal magic stone inside the cannon glows brilliantly, hums with intense energy, and begins its explosive discharge. The defensive guards and the nearby villagers flinch in surprise, wondering what on earth that terrifying, thundering sound could possibly be. The heavy stone projectile launches from the barrel, hurtling through the sky like a giant shooting star. The shell lands directly in the middle of the goblin horde, creating a massive, fiery shockwave that completely vaporizes several monsters. As the smoke clears, Joran groans in mild disappointment, noticing that the agile goblin mid-boss managed to dodge the main blast at the very last second. But Runton is already losing his mind in pure, ecstatic disbelief. He screams that this machine is absolutely incredible, flinging massive stone boulders as easily as if they were tiny marbles. Their army's soul mage soldier, Sikoop, watches in complete awe, utterly baffled by whatever high-level explosion magic his master is suddenly using. Runton stares at Joran, his red eyes sparkling with newfound respect. He realizes Joran's radical weapon design actually works flawlessly. Joran begins brainstorming improvements, suggesting they make the next batch of explosive stones much smaller and shoot them out of massive crossbows to dramatically increase their fire rate. Runton looks completely offended by the idea. The proud dwarf glares at Joran, demanding if he looks like some dainty elf girl to be playing around with weak wooden bows, and suggests they stick to heavy-duty artillery instead. He proudly flexes his arm, declaring that his dwarf muscles are more than strong enough to handle any heavy lifting, so they do not need any flimsy ranged weapons. Runton notes that throwing these explosive rocks by hand is extremely tedious because each one requires manual hammering, limiting them to throwing just 2 at a time. He realizes Joran was completely correct. A proper cannon can launch a massive bombardment of explosives higher, farther, and in much larger quantities. He internally admits he was being a stubborn fool. Down below, the rest of Joran's forces charge forward on their tamed deers to mop up the remaining disoriented goblins. Lillian leaps off her mount, spinning her halberd and letting out a fierce battle cry. A wild goblin leaps at her with a heavy wooden club, roaring in fury. Lillian easily ducks under the strike, delivering a swift, lethal slash that cuts the monster down. She slices through the enemy ranks with flawless grace, completely dominating the front lines. With a powerful thrust, she finishes the remaining front-line goblin guards. Joran rides up, praising her incredible combat skills. He points out that they have more than enough power to easily handle this horde on their own. Joran explains that when facing a massive swarm of pests, there is absolutely no need to fight honorably, and suggests they use some sneaky, coordinated dogpiling tactics. Lillian smiles, teasing him that Joran himself was the one who originally taught her those exact dirty tactics. Suddenly, Joran looks back at the tree line and commands his troops to take cover. He warns everyone that once the goblins get close, they are going to unleash their devastating new artillery weapon, and warns that lethal shrapnel will fly everywhere. The frontline guards look confused, wondering if he is referring to the massive explosion they saw on the left flank earlier. Lillian yells at the hesitating troops, commanding them to instantly take cover as Joran ordered. She watches Joran, thinking it is incredibly strange that the former Joran tamer, who always fought bravely at the absolute front, is suddenly relying on massive ranged weaponry, but she resolves to trust him anyway. Up on the hill, Runton proudly hoists a newly finished, perfectly carved stone shell, calling out to Joran that the ammunition is ready. Joran inspects the projectile, praising its perfect round shape, but notices a strange, deep hole bored into the side of the stone. With a mischievous smile, Joran asks Runton if there's a traditional dwarf dish where they stuff a baby boar inside a giant boar's belly. He is planning to stuff an explosive charge right inside that hole to maximize the blast. Joran compares his plan to a traditional dwarf dish, showing Runton a drawing of a roasted piglet stuffed inside a massive boar. Runton sweat drops, recognizing the traditional dwarf dish called todaji, but is completely confused as to why Joran is bringing up culinary recipes in the middle of a war zone. Joran grins, explaining that they are going to cook the goblins the exact same way. He plans to pack an explosive charge inside a hollow stone shell, creating a delayed fuse bomb inside a shell. Runton stares at him, completely astounded, and mutters that Joran is an absolute madman for inventing such a terrifyingly creative weapon. The narration box explains that Joran got this brilliant idea from a historical Joseon-era explosive shell he learned about during his artillery education classes in his past life. With a maniacal smile, Joran commands Runton to quickly drill several irregular holes into the stone shells, explaining that wider and more jagged holes will make the shrapnel even more lethal. He notes that while a normal magic stone requires a mage to constantly inject external mana to trigger an explosion, his primal magic stone is a completely different beast. The text box explains that the primal magic stone is a legendary artifact that automatically regenerates its own mana once depleted, making it an endless fuel source. Joran explains the difference with a clever analogy, stating that if a regular magic stone is cheap instant coffee mix, then his primal magic stone is premium Ethiopian coffee. Down on the ground, a soldier lies flat in the dirt, nervously asking how long they have to stay in this humiliating position. A couple of sneaky goblins peek over the ridge, completely confused about where all the humans have suddenly vanished to. Assuming the human forces have fled in terror, the greedy goblins let out a victory cheer and charge forward. Joran watches them enter the trap, his eye narrowing as he prepares to fire. The heart-shaped primal magic stone inside the cannon begins to hum and glow with intense power. Joran yells at the top of his lungs, introducing their new weapon, and commands it to fire at power level 10. The heavy iron mortar launches the stone projectile into the sky. A massive blast echoes through the valley as the shell is launched with a deafening boom. The goblins stop and look up, assuming the humans have launched a pathetic catapult shot. The goblins laugh mockingly as they watch the stone shell fly through the air in an incredibly slow, looping trajectory. The shell lands right in the middle of their group without exploding. The goblins gather around the dud, laughing and planning to roll the stone back to use it against the humans. The narration box explains that Joran purposely fired at low power so the curious goblins would gather directly around the shell. The second reason was to bypass manual detonation. Instead, Joran let the physical impact of the shell hitting the ground trigger a delayed explosive fuse inside the stone. Right as the goblins crowd around, the hollow stone shell violently detonates, unleashing a colossal, blinding explosion. The massive blast wave tears through the goblin vanguard, launching the charred monsters into the air in a rain of fire. Joran smiles, thoroughly satisfied with the massive amount of experience points he just received, and eagerly gets ready to load another shot. But Runton interrupts his excitement, pointing out that the heavy iron barrel of the mortar is already severely dented after just 2 shots. Runton grumbles that Joran first ordered him to carve stones, and now he is demanding he fix heavy iron artillery in the middle of a battle. Seeing the main force weakened, Joran commands his special cavalry unit to charge and finish off the remaining survivors. He explains to Lillian that they must clear this first wave as quickly as possible, warning that dragging their feet will result in a total disaster once the second wave spawns. He recalls the system tips, remembering that deploying fewer troops and eliminating the monsters quickly is the only way to secure a legendary clear grade. Joran gallops into the melee, swinging his sword and commanding his troops to show absolutely no mercy to anyone who resists. The armored spearmen charge forward, easily skewering the disoriented goblins. They cut through the fleeing monsters, completely dominating the battlefield. Joran halts his horse, looking down at a couple of surviving goblins huddled together. The 2 terrified goblins shake in fear, fully expecting to be brutally slaughtered. But Joran smiles warmly, offering them a chance to live if they drop their weapons and surrender. The shocked goblins quickly toss their clubs aside, completely bewildered by the humans' unexpected mercy. Joran watches them surrender, realizing that goblins who hesitate actually possess enough intelligence to be reformed and tamed. He warns them that trying to escape is completely pointless, reminding them that their cruel goblin taskmasters will only hunt them down and slaughter them anyway. He gives them a cold, slightly menacing ultimatum. They can either choose to die in a useless battle, or they can join him, eat as much as they want, and behave. His tamed deers eagerly chime in, squeaking at the goblins and assuring them that tamer territory is a literal paradise on Earth. The The goblins sweat nervously, completely dumbfounded to see wild forest monsters acting as hype men for a human noble. The Mandragora and he continue to earnestly pitch the benefits of the territory, fully convincing the captive audience. Realizing that fighting or fleeing is completely suicide, the goblins decide to fully trust the human and surrender. Joran is absolutely thrilled. He realizes that instead of pacifying monsters one by one, his advanced skills now allow him to perform a massive, high-efficiency area pacification. He assigns them simple numbers and orders them to line up. The newly recruited goblins fall into a neat line, marching obediently behind his horse. A guard looks at them anxiously, asking Joran if it is safe to let armed monsters walk behind them without being tied up. Joran reassures him, noting that these guys do not have the courage to betray him. Joran looks over the battlefield, which is littered with dead goblin corpses. He grumbles to himself about the massive cleanup effort, realizing that unlike in video games, these bodies will not magically disappear, and wonders how he is going to dispose of them all. As the morning sun rises over the quiet forest, the sky turns a brilliant blue, showing a brief moment of peace. Joran stands near the clearing, watching over a small group of pinkish, pacified goblins standing on a patch of dirt. He commands the goblins to move quickly, promising that once they finish carrying and cleaning up, they can go rest somewhere safe. One of the goblins salutes with an obedient nod, assuring him that they fully understand his orders, and asks where they should start piling things. Under Joran's direct command, the pacified goblins begin dragging and stacking the corpses of their fallen kin neatly in the dirt. The narration box explains that the massive pile of corpses in front of their defensive line was a major hazard. During battle, the wild goblins would literally step on their own dead kind to climb up, using them as meat shields against the cannon shrapnel. Joran observes the cleanup, reflecting on how, in video games, monster corpses disappear automatically. But here, leaving piles of bodies rot could cause plagues, or worse, allow an enemy warlock to raise them as undead. With a dark, mischievous grin, Joran decides that instead of letting the corpses go to waste, he will simply find a highly practical way to exploit them himself. The system note explains that goblins have incredibly strong stomachs and possess absolutely no burial culture. They have no qualms about carrying their own kind's bodies, and would even resort to cannibalism if necessary. A blue system tip confirms that goblins will quickly eat their fallen kin's bodies to keep other predators away. Chibi Joran sweatdrops, trying to process this morbid information through the lens of cultural relativism. But he quickly realizes this is an absolute win, since letting the goblins dispose of the bodies saves him both the hassle of cleanup and a fortune in monster food costs. Joran celebrates this morbid efficiency, cheering that he has successfully killed 3 birds with 1 stone. He turns to his weary troops, commanding the frontline spearmen to rotate with the reserves. He orders the injured to report to Priest Rubia, and the exhausted to head over to Peach. In the medical tent, Yak looks deeply uncomfortable, sweating nervously and asking Rubia why she is aggressively kneading his thigh when his actual injury is in his foot. Rubia glares down at him with a terrifyingly cold expression, telling him to shut up, relax, and let her handle his body, leaving the poor soldier completely frozen in fear. Meanwhile, Peach is busy pouring a fresh cup of tea made from the leaves of the mandragorani antlers. She cheerfully carries a tray of freshly baked herbal cookies, proudly offering them to the weary soldiers. The 2 chibi soldiers munch on the cookies, amazed that while the tea brewed by the cook Jerry is incredibly bitter, Peach's recipe tastes like sweet honey water. A system notification pops up, confirming the soldier's fatigue has greatly decreased thanks to her devoted care. It notes that while magic can heal wounds, only proper rest can fully restore physical stamina. Peach gently wipes a soldier's forehead with a cool, potion-soaked towel, helping him feel instantly refreshed and revitalized. Joran watches her work, deeply impressed by how steadfastly she handles the dirty work without a single complaint. He resolves to raise her pay as soon as his territory's financial situation improves. Nearby, 2 resting soldiers bicker among themselves, teasing their captain about how he managed to stay completely clean and sweat-free despite using powerful fire magic. Chibi Joran walks up to them with a smug smile, pointing out how incredibly happy and lively they look compared to when they first arrived on the frontier. The soldiers quickly salute, admitting that guarding the borderlands under his command is actually incredibly rewarding. Peach smiles sweetly, claiming she doesn't mind the hard labor or the low pay at all. Suddenly, her eyes flare with a terrifying, passionate glow as she whispers to herself that all this hard work is completely worth it, as long as she can become her master's wife and the lady of the territory. Mayral stands near the tents, holding her wooden staff and letting out a soft sigh of surprise. She timidly taps Joran on the back, nervously asking how she did with her weather magic during the previous battle. She looks up with large, pleading eyes, asking him to be completely honest with his evaluation. Joran puts on a dark, serious expression and flatly tells her that, to be perfectly honest, her magical performance wasn't quite up to his expectations. Mayral is completely devastated. She stands frozen in shock, her world completely shattering as she prepares to cry. Tears stream down her face as she apologizes, crying that she was terrified of disappointing her lord and being a useless burden. Yoren instantly breaks his serious face, flashing a warm, bright smile and clarifying that her performance actually far exceeded his expectations. Mayril's face completely lights up with sparkling, happy eyes, overjoyed to hear his praise. Joran gently pats her head, praising her as the finest weather mage in the entire territory and telling her to keep up the great work. Mayril enthusiastically promises to work her hardest from now on. She clutches her staff with a bright, determined smile, completely motivated by his kindness. With Mayril taken care of, Joran decides to head over to the training grounds to check if Liliane is resting properly. The scene cuts to a scenic waterfall cascading down the rocky cliffs on the outskirts of their camp. Instead of resting, Liliane is standing near a tree, tightly gripping her heavy spear. With a sharp, menacing glare and a loud battle cry, she lunges forward and thrusts her spear with incredible speed. Her spear tip strikes a target post perfectly, piercing a target representing a goblin's head with lethal precision. She stands calmly, completely unbothered by her intense workout. Joran walks up from behind, praising her perfect accuracy. He stands at a distance, relieved to see that she is completely uninjured after the fierce battle. But Joran quickly scolds her, demanding to know why she is exerting herself when he explicitly ordered the exhausted troops to rest. Liliane crosses her arms, stubbornly replying that she is neither injured nor exhausted, so his rest orders do not concern her. She steps closer, teasing Joran about how incredibly cheeky he has gotten lately, but agrees to follow his orders and rest. Her gaze softens as she looks at him, advising Joran to take care of his own health too, reminding him that it hasn't been long since his resurrection. Joran smiles, walking away with his scout deer, who happily chirps about its love for resting. Joran notes that strategic rest is a vital part of any battle. He plucks a fresh mandragorani leaf and pops it into his mouth, noting that it is incredibly effective for curing fatigue. His scout deer looks at him in terror, sweat dropping and asking if Joran is planning to sell its antlers. Joran chuckles, clarifying he only wants the leaves. Liliane watches the captured goblins carry heavy stone blocks and skeptically asks Joran if he is truly planning to keep using them as manual labor. Joran replies that of course he is, explaining that he arranged for them to serve as valuable territory assets. Liliane looks unconvinced, highly doubting how helpful a bunch of sneaky goblins can be. Joran teases her, asking if his capable adjutant is simply too proud to accept help from tamed monsters. Liliane flatly denies needing any help from them. She takes a massive gulp of the herbal tea Joran was drinking, only to instantly spit it out in absolute choking disgust as her world completely shatters. Liliane wipes her mouth in pure panic, claiming she only drank it to preserve her stamina. She argues that goblins are completely different from docile deers, warning they will eventually betray them and become a burden unless they are used as meat shields. Joran grins, pointing out that using their hard-earned, pacified monsters as arrow fodder would be a total waste. He explains they are perfect for hard labor, and because they eat monster corpses, they cost absolutely nothing to feed. He tells her to relax, pointing out that they still have plenty of time to rest before the next goblin assault. Suddenly, a bright red system warning flashes across his eyes, causing Joran to freeze in absolute panic. The system warns that variable difficulty has been applied, and ominous, whispering shadows begin to emerge from the dark forest. Joran stares into the trees, his eyes widening in horror as several terrifying goblin-like monsters with glowing red eyes emerge from the pitch black, setting up another brutal wave. Just as Joran thinks he can finally catch his breath, he is hit with a barrage of negative effects due to the system's variable difficulty scaling. He commands his mount, Unit 8, to quickly redirect their course to secure the left flank as the battle intensifies. The system notes that the Goblin Vanguard has deployed an advanced tactic of shield bearers and archers working together, creating a major tactical headache. Normally, goblins would easily collapse in one hit from his soldiers' heavy spears, but these elite-tier variants are proving to be far more durable. The cunning goblin archers are even demonstrated firing their arrows precisely through the narrow gaps in their companions' heavy wooden shields. The goblins flash smug, menacing grins, highly confident in their defensive strategy. Though their makeshift bows are extremely crude and have a limited range, their sheer numbers are overwhelming. The heavy shields easily deflect Joran's defensive arrows. He realizes that regardless of how primitive their weapons are, a stray arrow can still deal lethal damage. Joran grinds his teeth, realizing that the goblin's sudden transition to ranged combat is going to be incredibly difficult to deal with. Down below, the goblin shield bearers lock their barricades tightly, completely neutralizing Joran's ranged forces. Banal hurls another stone, yelling at the goblins to see if they can block a heavy projectile. Joran looks over the chaotic battlefield, wishing he could simply mount his horse, charge the barricades, and slaughter them all himself. He considers sending in a heavy cavalry charge, but the dense forest path is too narrow and cluttered for horses. Joran sweat drops, realizing he made a massive tactical error by not preparing a clear entrance for his cavalry to bypass the obstacles. The goblin vanguard slowly advances behind their heavy shields, preparing to pierce his defense line. Sensing the imminent breach, Joran charges forward, screaming in absolute panic. But Meryl is already stepping forward, raising her wooden staff to unleash her weather magic. A massive, violent vortex of wind erupts from her staff, creating a powerful gale that catches the incoming arrows mid-air. The soldiers watch in complete awe as the giant gust of wind physically turns the entire barrage of goblin arrows right back at them. The disoriented goblins are suddenly pelted by their own sharp arrows, causing their vanguard to stumble in panic. Though most of the deflected arrows are blocked by the shields or fall harmlessly to the ground, the sudden counterattack successfully halts their advance. Meryl looks down, sweat dropping and panting heavily from the extreme mana drain. She slumps her shoulders and begins crying, sobbing that she was incredibly weak and apologizing for not being able to deal any actual damage to the enemy. Joran patently comforts her, pointing out that blocking a massive, lethal volley of arrows is an incredible achievement. A system notification flashes, confirming that Runton has officially finished repairing their heavy iron mortar. Runton comes running back, holding a massive stone shell and proudly yelling that their heavy artillery is fully serviced and ready for action. Joran smiles excitedly, ready to resume the bombardment and test the mortar's limits. He locks his coordinates, activates the primal magic stone, and launches another massive explosive shell. But as the smoke clears, Joran realizes the delayed fused shell didn't deal as much damage this time, as the goblins quickly hid behind their reinforced shield wall to block the shrapnel. Joran grins, noting that even though the blast didn't kill them, the intense force has completely worn out their wooden shields. He yells at Runton to pass him the next heavy stone shell. The heavy, spherical stone shell rolls into place, looking comically like a giant bowling ball. Joran stares at the round, heavy stone, a brilliant strategic idea suddenly crossing his mind. He flashes a menacing, confident grin, declaring that since the goblins are all lined up in a neat, narrow row, they should just use them as pins and go bowling. The heavy iron wheels of the mortar spin violently as Joran adjusts the trajectory. A blue system pop-up confirms that his artillery master skill has leveled up, setting the firing angle in a perfect, straight line. Joran activates the primal magic stone, launching the massive, heavy bowling shell. The giant, spherical stone hurtles through the air, heading straight toward the goblin barricade. The goblins shiver behind their shattered shields, completely paralyzed with fear as the heavy boulder approaches. The massive stone ball smashes directly through their defense line, completely crushing the shields and launching the monsters into the air in a spectacular strike. Joran cheers in absolute excitement, celebrating his perfect strike and laughing at the flying goblins. The narration box explains that Joran's previous cleanup strategy was actually a massive tactical genius. By piling up the goblin corpses on both sides of the narrow path, he left the enemy with absolutely no room to dodge his straight-line bowling attack. With the left flank successfully cleared, Joran turns back to Meryl, telling her they need to quickly head over to the right flank to help the rest of the squad. He extends his hand, commanding her to quickly hop on to the back of his deer. Meryl blushes furiously, completely terrified of riding a wild monster again. Without wasting any time, Joran firmly grabs her hand and pulls her up onto the saddle. The deer Unit 8 dashes through the thick foliage, galloping at full speed toward the right flank. The fast mount leaps over the rocky terrain, heading directly toward the sounds of battle. Joran tells the dizzy Meryl to hold on tight, promising that they will go find Lillian the moment they secure this flank. He spots Lillian fighting in the distance, and loudly calls out to his adjutant to check on the situation. Lillian spins around, her face twisting in pure panic as she screams at Joran that he is in immediate danger. Suddenly, a massive, lethal barrage of arrows comes flying out of the dark sky, raining directly toward their position. The sharp arrows land violently all around them. Joran's eyes widen in absolute shock as he desperately wraps his arms around Meryl to shield her from the incoming projectile rain. The arrows rain down on their position, catching Joran and Meryl completely off guard. Joran quickly reacts to shield her from the incoming fire. Meryl is in a complete panic, tears streaming down her face as she desperately tries to figure out if she should cast a lightning spell or a wind barrier to save them. Joran grinds his teeth, realizing that while his heavy knight armor can easily tank the physical arrows, Meryl's fragile mage body would be obliterated. He decides to protect her by unleashing his aura. He channels his energy, causing a bright, purple, magical aura to erupt around his body to act as a shield. He wraps his arms tightly around Meryl, enveloping her completely in his protective aura, but grumbles to himself about how difficult it is to control and maintain the shield with his low-level skills. Watching this from a distance, Lillian's face twists into a scowl of pure, vein-popping jealousy. She fumes to herself, wondering why on earth that green-haired maid is so important to their lord. Unable to stand it any longer, Lillian clenches her fist on her spear, channeling a massive, blazing red fire aura into her weapon. She raises her glowing spear, her eyes burning with pure fury and focus. With a deafening battle cry, she hurls the spear with incredible force directly toward the incoming monster ranks. As the dust settles, Joran checks on Meryl, gently asking if she is okay after that terrifying close call. Meryl looks up at him with sparkling, happy eyes, assuring him she is completely fine, and asks if her lord is hurt anywhere. Suddenly, Lillian stomps up behind them, staring down with a terrifying, red-faced scowl of absolute jealousy that sends shivers down Joran's spine. Lillian marches closer, her heavy boots stomping loudly against the dirt. Without a single word, Lillian coldly shoves Meryl out of the way, telling her to step back because she is blocking the path. Meryl stands to the side looking completely terrified, while Joran sweat drops in confusion, wondering why on earth Lillian is glaring at him like she wants to murder him. Joran turns his attention back to his mages, checking on Sakup. He notes that while Sakup is highly skilled, his low mana pool is a major bottleneck for sustained combat. He looks at the burning arrow lodged in the dirt, reflecting on their tactical situation. He notes that while he and Lillian can easily tank a few stray arrows, his regular soldiers don't possess aura shields, meaning a stray shot to the face could be instantly fatal. Joran walks over to retrieve Lillian's spear, but grumbles to himself as he struggles to lift the weapon, wondering why a regular spear is acting like a legendary holy sword. He strains his muscles, completely unable to pull the heavy spear out of the hard ground. Lillian easily steps up, grabs the hilt, and pulls the spear out of the ground with a single, effortless hand. She explains that Joran isn't too weak to lift it, but rather the weapon is still heavily loaded with her residual fire aura, which naturally rejects anyone else's touch. She explains the mechanics of aura, noting that when you load energy into a weapon and throw it, the aura naturally disperses in all directions over time, making it incredibly hard to control. Lillian notes that because of her urgency to save him, she loaded nearly her entire mana pool into that single throw, which is why the residual aura is still so strong. Joran's eyes widen as he realizes that weapons can be used to store and transport magical energy. A brilliant idea crosses his mind. If aura can be loaded into thrown weapons, he can easily apply this exact same logic to their heavy iron mortar shells. He quickly turns to Meryl, commanding her to summon her wind magic one more time. He explains she doesn't need a massive storm, just a light barrier to protect the troops from the arrows. Meryl looks down, admitting that with her current low mana, she will not be able to blow the goblins away, but she clenches her fist, telling Joran that it is completely fine. With newfound determination, she begins channeling her wind magic, focused entirely on protecting her allies. She raises her wooden staff, her eyes glowing with absolute focus. A massive, swirling wind barrier begins to form around their defensive line. The gust of wind acts like a solid wall, easily deflecting the incoming goblin arrows and keeping the soldiers safe. The goblin poison squad leader watches in frustration as his ranged attacks are completely neutralized. The giant mid-boss roars in fury, commanding his vanguard to charge the barricades. Watching them charge, Joran flashes a sinister, confident smile. He yells out a loud command, ordering his scout deer to fetch the repaired mortar immediately and tells Sakup to drop their magical barrier. Sakup panics, pointing out that dropping and recycling a magical barrier in the middle of a battle requires a massive amount of mana and takes way too long. Joran grins, explaining that he knows the mechanics perfectly. He details the exact mana cost and reflux time required to dissolve the barrier, leaving the mage completely speechless. Sakup is stunned, demanding to know how Joran could possibly know such advanced magical formulas. Joran casually tells him he has his ways, having commanded him countless times in his gaming days. Joran instructs him that they don't need to dissolve the entire barrier, they just need to split off a portion of the active mana to construct a new shell. Sakup points out that he tried using a standard mana shell earlier, but it was way too weak to pierce through the goblins' heavy wooden shields. Joran replies that this time they are going to make the shell enormous, incredibly hard, and sharp enough to skewer through their shields like butter. Sakup worries his low mana won't be able to propel such a heavy projectile. He adds that they would need a highly precise launch angle and exact dimensions to fire it. Joran tells him not to worry and promises to handle the calculations. Right on cue, his Scout Deer Unit 8 slides to a halt, bringing the repaired iron mortar right to them. Joran patently tells Sakup not to worry about propelling the heavy shell, explaining the mortar's primal magic stone will handle all the firepower. Sakup adjusts his glasses with a determined smile, fully trusting Joran's calculations and agreeing to give it a shot. He channels his magic, casting a massive, glowing blue magical shell right in front of the mortar. He offers to teleport the shell inside, but Joran tells him not to waste his mana and simply slide it in by hand. Joran easily hoists the heavy, glowing magical shell, chuckling to himself about how mages always overwork their brains when they could easily just use their hands. He slides the massive, glowing blue magic shell directly into the barrel of the iron mortar. A blue system window flashes, confirming the mortar's primal magic stone is a perfect match for the mana shell, and prepares to launch at 30% power. Joran targets the enemy boss and yells the launch command. The mortar detonates, launching the massive magical projectile. The giant goblin mid-boss huddles behind his heavy shield wall, highly confident his guard can block any standard cannonball. But Joran grins, declaring that while they might be able to block a regular cannonball with a wooden shield, absolutely no one can block a literal magic missile. The colossal, glowing blue magical shell smashes directly into their barricade, unleashing a blinding, earth-shaking magical explosion that completely vaporizes the goblin vanguard. As the second wave begins, Sakup watches Joran's magical mortar in absolute awe, completely stunned by its raw, destructive power. The young mage adjusts his glasses nervously, admitting that even with his high-tier teleportation spells, achieving this level of kinetic force would be completely impossible. Joran grins, asking him why they should waste his precious mana on complex spells when they can easily achieve the same results with primitive artillery. Sakup is fully convinced. Joran pats his shoulder, telling him to stop overthinking and help him load the next explosive shell immediately. The narration box explains that the second wave was cleared with absolute ease, as the tightly packed goblin shield bearers were completely vaporized by the massive magical shrapnel. But Joran's excitement is short-lived, as another massive group of fanged goblin mid-bosses begins to crawl out of the dark forest. Joran clenches his fist in absolute fury, cursing the game's terrible, trash difficulty scaling for spawning elite mid-bosses as if they were common trash mobs. He frantically turns to Sakup, demanding to know how much mana the young mage has left in his pool. Sakup pants heavily, sweat pouring down his face as he weakly admits that he is completely out of mana and cannot help with another magical shell. With his mage completely drained, Joran has no other choice but to load a regular stone projectile into the iron mortar. The heavy boulder lands, but Joran's eyes widen in anger as he notices the elite goblin enforcers are physically grabbing their smaller comrades and using them as meat shields to block the impact. The cruel tactic works, allowing the high-level enforcers to bypass his artillery and continue their advance completely uninjured. Joran growls in frustration, cursing the developer of this trash game. He realizes he needs to think outside the box to bypass their meat shield strategy. He pulls up his tactical map, analyzing their layout to devise a precise, high-priority assassination strategy to take out only the enforcer leaders. Joran stares at the approaching horde, his eyes narrowing as the plan comes together. He calls out his commands, determined to turn the battlefield's environment to his absolute advantage. With a confident smirk, he orders Meryl to summon a localized wind spell to create a thick, heavy fog directly on the goblin side of the field. Next, Joran instructs Duner and Banal to prepare sandbags, telling them to hurl loose gravel directly into the foggy zone to completely blind the approaching monsters. Banal happily accepts the task. Finally, Joran turns his attention to his newest tamed unit, Gremlin No. 1. Joran chuckles, admitting he almost forgot about this tiny, fluffy creature. Joran crouches down, instructing the tiny gremlin to ignore the common trash mobs and focus entirely on taking down the large enforcer leaders. The gremlin nods enthusiastically, but Joran knows that despite its incredible speed, its low physical defense means a single direct blow from a goblin would be fatal. To ensure its safety, Joran sprinkles a generous amount of dark camouflage powder over the gremlin's fluffy fur. Once the camouflaged gremlin is prepped, Joran gently places it inside the heavy barrel of the iron mortar. He packs a couple of soft sandbags directly behind the gremlin, explaining that the bags will act as a protective cushion during launch and serve another vital strategic purpose. With everything in place, Joran commands his artillery to fire, launching the tiny, camouflaged gremlin directly into the enemy lines. The shell detonates, launching the sandbags and the gremlin right into the middle of the goblin vanguard. The sandbags burst open upon impact, unleashing a massive, choking cloud of loose sand and dust that completely blinds the nearby goblins. The blinded goblins rub their eyes in panic, completely unable to see through the heavy, sandy fog. Taking advantage of the total chaos, the tiny, camouflaged gremlin lands softly on the ground, completely invisible in the heavy dust storm. Its glowing red eyes peer through the dark fog. Its fluffy, camo-coated body makes absolutely zero noise, turning the tiny beast into a perfect, silent assassin. The invisible gremlin leaps through the dust, moving with lightning speed. Before the goblins can even process what is happening, the tiny assassin swiftly slits the throat of the nearest enforcer leader. The gremlin moves from target to target, systematically taking out the high-priority leaders while the common goblins look around in absolute confusion. The text box explains that the gremlin's rapid, silent movements and perfect camouflage made it impossible for the low-intelligence goblins to detect. By the time the goblins finally notice the tiny threat, almost all of their powerful enforcer leaders have already been completely incapacitated. Realizing they are being slaughtered by a tiny, invisible ghost, the remaining goblins begin to panic and scatter. Sensing the mission is complete, Joran yells out a loud retreat signal, commanding the gremlin to pull back immediately. He orders Banal and his archers to snipe the remaining goblins to secure the tiny assassin's safe return. Banal hurls a heavy rock, hitting an approaching goblin leader square in the foot and stopping its pursuit in its tracks. Joran praises Banal's incredible accuracy, promising him a massive bonus if he manages to pull off his next highly critical task. Banal smiles, telling Joran he doesn't care about money, and asks to be rewarded with a delicious special meal and fewer duty days instead. Joran hands him a glowing, orange explosive magic stone, instructing Banal to plant these highly unstable road bombs along the roadside. Joran warns him to stay hidden and to only detonate the orange stones on his direct signal, and Banal nods, understanding the plan. With the left flank fully secured under Banal's watch, Joran looks toward the horizon, deeply worried about Lillian on the right attack route. His scout deer, number 8, lets out a confident, hyped chirp, letting him know they are fully prepped to charge. Joran mounts the deer, and just as he predicted, a brutal, chaotic battle is already unfolding on the right attack route. The forest is filled with violent flashes of magic and steel as the human forces struggle against the massive goblin wave. Deep in the dark, shadowy forest, a massive horde of goblins with glowing red eyes prepares to launch their final, overwhelming charge. We start this segment with a visual of the dark forest where the terrifying overseer monsters are desperately driving the remaining goblins forward, pushing them to their absolute limits. The goblins charge forward through the misty trees, roaring in a desperate bid to overrun the human defenses. Up at the defensive barricade, the soldiers tense up and grip their weapons, bracing themselves as the massive horde approaches. Down on the front line, Rabia flashes a cold, confident smile, beginning her divine prayer to protect her allies. She raises her hands, channeling a massive burst of holy magic to safeguard the warriors. A bright, divine protective shield instantly wraps around the frontline soldiers, giving them a massive defense boost and rallying their morale. A visual of a heavy, glowing strike cleaving through the incoming monsters is shown. Lillian easily slices through the goblin ranks with her fiery spear, completely decimating the attackers. She keeps up her relentless counterattack, holding the enemy completely at bay. Mayra watches her incredible performance and asks if she needs a defensive shield. Lillian flatly replies that she is completely fine. Lillian explains that her fiery aura is more than enough protection, telling Mayral to focus all her defensive magic on the regular soldiers. Watching this, Joran sighs in relief. Joran pats his deer mount, glad his front line hasn't taken any major hits yet. But as he looks toward the misty forest, he realizes there is still an absolute ocean of enemies heading their way. A system warning pops up, alerting him that the final wave is starting soon with an insane spawn rate. Joran panics, realizing he needs to pull out his trump card right now. Joran previously ordered Runton to gather highly flammable minerals from the rocky hill, planning to pack them directly into his mortar shells. Joran looks at the iron mortar, asking Runton if the dwarf can also whip up a set of heavy armor for his deer. Runton looks completely furious, screaming at Joran for planning a cavalry charge on a forest deer when they have perfectly good war horses back at the camp. Joran laughs, explaining that horses cannot easily scale this steep hill. He tells the dwarf to forget the full armor and just craft a specialized tool instead. Runton grumbles, asking what kind of crazy invention Joran wants him to hammer out this time. Joran hands him a metal pan, instructing the dwarf to hammer it out into a perfect funnel shape without blocking the handle. Runton works comically fast, and in seconds, Joran is holding a perfectly crafted metal megaphone. He praises the dwarf and tells his deer to open its mouth wide. Joran straps the megaphone to the deer's mouth, and number 8 lets out a massive, amplified roar that echoes loudly through the valley. The deer blinks in surprise as Joran explains that this specialized megaphone is going to turn its screech into a lethal ranged weapon. Joran pats the nervous deer, telling it not to worry because he is going to coat its entire body in his protective purple aura shield. The deer nods in respect, fully placing its trust in its master. Joran commands his deer to charge down the hill, planning to trample the goblin vanguard before they can get surrounded. Number 8 charges like a heavy battering ram, slamming directly into the goblins and sending the terrified monsters flying. Lillian joins the fray, slicing through the disoriented goblins with a powerful horizontal sweep, but their momentum is blocked as a colossal goblin overseer steps out of the ranks, roaring that anyone who retreats will be executed. Joran stares in awe at the giant named monster, realizing they just encountered a powerful, elite-tier boss named Dual Glaive. Joran checks the boss's name on the system window, grumbling to himself about whether the developer meant dual or duel before deciding to just ignore the bad translation. He realizes the best way to defeat this guy is in a one-on-one duel instead of wasting their precious cannon ammunition. Joran inspects the boss's stats, confirming they are leagues above any regular overseer. A blue system window pops up, confirming that if Joran defeats this boss in single combat, he will unlock a legendary achievement and a massive reward. Joran smiles greedily, realizing the massive reward is simply too good to pass up. With a confident grin, Joran commands his deer to charge directly at the giant, while his mount nervously wonders if its master is being a little too reckless today. Joran has absolutely no intention of actually trading physical sword blows with this massive giant. The deer gallops forward at full speed, and Joran commands it to let out its screech right as they close the distance. Number 8 opens its fanged mouth, unleashing a deafening, high-pitched screech directly toward the giant's face. The metal megaphone focuses the sonic attack like a concentrated laser, completely shattering the boss's eardrums and leaving him screaming in absolute agony. The intense pain causes the disoriented giant to drop his heavy weapons, leaving his defenses wide open. Joran wastes no time, leaping off his mount and swinging his glowing, aura-infused sword in a powerful horizontal slash. His blade slices through the dark with blinding speed. With a single clean strike, Joran decapitates the giant boss, sending its head flying into the air. A blue system prompt flashes, announcing that Joran has successfully unlocked a special achievement and rewards him with a massive payout of 1,000 points. Joran is absolutely thrilled, noting that this achievement is an absolute goldmine compared to his usual tiny rewards. But the system adds a warning, explaining that his spectacular victory has come with an unwelcome side effect. Seeing their powerful leader brutally slain, the other overseers panic, mark Joran as a major threat, and begin to swarm him all at once. Hearing the deafening war cries behind him, Joran turns around to find a massive wave of angry monsters rushing his position. The massive horde swarms forward, fully intent on tearing the human commander to pieces. Realizing he is about to be completely overrun, Joran frantically tells his deer to retreat behind their defensive barricades as fast as possible. As he retreats, Joran screams at Runton, asking if the highly flammable stone ammunition is finally prepped and loaded. Runton proudly yells that it is ready. Runton fires the mortar, launching a massive barrage of small, highly flammable minerals high into the air. The stones scatter across the battlefield, landing directly in the middle of the advancing goblin vanguard. The small, highly flammable minerals rain down all over the ground, completely surrounding the confused monsters. Joran turns to the left flank, screaming at Banal that now is the absolute perfect time to launch his explosive stone. Banal pulls back his slingshot, lighting a highly unstable explosive stone and preparing to fire. With perfect accuracy, Banal hurls the burning stone directly into the center of the scattered minerals. A nearby goblin looks down in total confusion, staring at the small, glowing flame under its feet. The spark ignites the highly flammable minerals, triggering a colossal chain reaction explosion that completely vaporizes the entire swarming horde in a spectacular carpet bombing. The goblin vanguard is completely engulfed in Joran's massive fiery trap. With their formations broken, the burning monsters scramble in total panic. The screaming goblins flail wildly, completely consumed by the raging inferno. Joran watches the destruction with a dark, satisfied grin, pleased with how beautifully his plan is burning. But Lillian crosses her arms and dryly points out a major flaw. Since they built their barricades out of wood, their own defensive line is about to burn down just as nicely as the goblins. Joran completely freezes. A large group of flaming goblins continues to charge directly toward their burning barricades, desperate to break through. Joran is caught in absolute, awkward silence, realizing he just accidentally torched his own defenses. Joran shouts out a commanding order to his remaining forces, calling for his loyal Mandragorani companions to rally to his side immediately. Acting quickly, Ho Young relies on his gaming knowledge to organize a prompt response. He utilizes the primary advantage of his Mandragorani deer, their innate ability to move across steep, mountainous terrain with ease to bypass the slower goblins. A pair of boots carefully navigates the rocky ground. Joran breathes a sigh of relief, glad that the slow movements of the enemy units have given him a suitable window to execute his strategy. We see a wider vertical view of Joran sliding down the rugged hillside with caution. He focuses entirely on maintaining his balance to avoid falling down the steep, rocky cliff. The tamed Mandragorani deer look energized, their eyes glowing with a fiery intensity as they let out a unified battle cry to prepare for the assault. With impressive coordination, the deers bound down the rocky hillside, kicking up dirt and leaves as they descend rapidly toward the battlefield. A stray flaming goblin runs frantically through the battlefield, spreading the fire. Thankfully, several goblins are forced to halt behind a massive, non-flammable stone wall on the field. The stone wall acts as a perfect natural firewall, completely blocking the raging flames from spreading over to Joran's side. The trapped goblins peek over the stone barricade, completely blocked and unable to advance. Joran stands on the other side of the stone firewall, looking down at the trapped monsters and smugly asking what they plan to do now. With the enemy completely blocked, Joran decides it is the perfect opportunity to test his newly leveled up pacification skill. He commands his tamed deers to stand behind the firewall and let out a coordinated, deafening screech to weaken the survivors. The system confirms the tactical advantage as the deers easily neutralize the remaining vanguard. But instead of letting the deers attack, Joran has them execute an incredibly hilarious propaganda routine. The deers wink at the terrified goblins, chirping happily about how amazing Joran's territory is. One cute deer smiles warmly, singing in its monster language that Tamer territory is a literal paradise on Earth. The other deers join in, harmonizing and inviting the starving goblins to surrender and join their cozy community. Another deer chews on a leaf comically, bragging about how incredibly well their human master takes care of them. The captured goblins sweat nervously, staring at the deers in complete shock, wondering if these monsters have gone completely insane. The tamed deers continue their cheerful routine, running and jumping around to show off their healthy, glossy coats. One of the goblin leaders looks at the plump deers, admitting they actually look incredibly well fed and healthy. A skeptical goblin warns the others not to fall for the trap, assuming they are just being fattened up to be eaten. But another goblin retorts that humans don't even eat goblin meat, so they have nothing to lose. The propaganda works flawlessly. The goblins begin arguing, realizing that surrendering to a kind human lord is infinitely better than starving to death under their cruel overseers. The weary goblins drop their weapons and look up at Joran with hopeful eyes. They stare submissively at his blade, completely ready to surrender. Joran watches them, a smug grin crossing his face as he realizes his elaborate psychological tactic worked perfectly. With a confident smirk, he raises his hands, preparing to execute a massive taming spell. Joran unleashes his magic, casting a massive purple aura over the entire group of kneeling goblins. The magical energy wraps around the crowd as the goblins joyfully pledge their complete loyalty to their new lord. A system notification pops up, confirming the mass taming is a perfect success. The goblins smile comically, fully brainwashed and added to Joran's growing frontier workforce. A blue system prompt confirms that over 20 goblin prisoners have been successfully tamed for a minuscule 2 energy points. Joran is absolutely thrilled, laughing greedily at the sheer cost efficiency of it all. A system tip warns him that even tamed monsters need proper rest and rewards to keep their dissatisfaction levels low, advising him never to let his guard down. Joran nods, locking that valuable tip away for the future. From this point forward, every single remaining wave of the invasion is handled with absolute ease. As the next wave spawns, the marching goblins sniff the air, wondering why the forest suddenly smells like a massive barbecue. They run forward, only to find the burning bodies of the previous wave have formed a colossal wall of fire, trapping them completely. Joran's archers easily pick off the trapped survivors, raining down a barrage of sharp arrows on the helpless targets. Blocked by a blazing wall of corpses on one side and a rain of arrows on the other, the goblin forces are completely wiped out. But right as they celebrate, a massive red system warning flashes. The final boss, a powerful hobgoblin, is about to spawn at a completely random location. Joran realizes the random spawn means the boss could strike from either flank. He instructs his troops to split their forces evenly to prepare for the hit. He smiles confidently, fully prepared to deal with the boss as long as his defense lines hold the flanks. But there is a terrifying twist. The random arrival the system warned about is absolutely not limited to the main attack routes. We cut to the quiet, unprotected eastern zone near Chilok Mountain, where a lone guard stands watch. Up on the wooden wall, the guard panics in absolute terror, frantically screaming that a colossal monster is heading straight toward their completely undefended sector. The scout's eyes widen in sheer panic as he stares at the towering threat. Out of the misty shadows, a colossal dark purple hobgoblin with glowing red eyes stands tall, raising a massive battle axe and preparing to obliterate the outpost.